Today's video will be sponsored by Parade, so stay tuned for a special code you can use to get 50% off of your order. A disclaimer before we begin. Today's video will include talks of bodies in many forms. As a content warning, please know that we will be discussing in detail elements of gym culture, weightlifting, and fitness, including diet and weight loss, both in a historical and a critical sense. This will include discussions of specific numbers for height and weight, mainly in relation to myself or the people that I'm interviewing, but if that type of discussion isn't something that you're interested in hearing about, or if you don't think it will be beneficial to your mental health right now, then I would recommend skipping this video. This is going to be one of those videos that I request that before engaging with the video, like leaving a comment or forming an opinion on the video as a whole, that you watch the entire video. I completely understand if you don't have the time to watch the entire video, or if mentally you're not in the headspace right now where you'd feel comfortable watching the entire video. I completely understand, especially because I know that this video is very long and does deal with a lot of very controversial and very sensitive topics. But in this video, I attempted to look at many different sides of an issue and try to find where things are true and where things are misleading, and because of that, it can be very misleading to watch only one section of the video without looking at all of the context surrounding it. I can't control what opinions you form or what you do. At the end of the day, that is your choice. However, my request to you in watching this video is that I would really appreciate if people watch through the entire video before leaving a comment and before deciding what their overall opinion on everything is. Thank you. So I'm back from the gym. What the heck is going on here? I've been lifting weights for about 3 years now, and lately I've been getting a lot of conflicting information about what the greater social implications of my hobby could be. I've heard that gym culture is for toxic alpha males, that fitness podcasts are a gateway to Jordan Peterson, who I don't think actually lifts, and that gym bros, while claiming to be the biggest advocates of body science, actually make up their own fake bro science, which is just a pipeline to the alt-right and to anti-vax conspiracy theories. On the other side, I've heard that loving your body as is a radical leftist idea, that only sensitive little snowflakes would dare to not hate their bodies, that rejecting diet culture is a necessity to be anti-capitalist, and that also weight loss is racist? There's a lot to unpack here, which is why I read some books on this topic, I dove into tons of research online, and I spoke to multiple licensed professionals and people with a lot of experience in these topics with interviews that I will include in this video. Today's video will be discussing multiple angles of fitness and gym culture, which in some cases can include talk of weight loss or fat loss or muscle gain, etc., because in a lot of circles, those can be parts of people's goals at the gym. Though I do want to make it very clear right now that those are not always people's gym goals, nor should they be, as I'll talk about toward the end of this video. Part of creating equality in the fitness world will come from recognizing that the gym should be a welcoming place for all, including those who don't necessarily want to get buff or swole or ripped, but also those who just enjoy exercise for their own mental, physical, or emotional health, or those who are training in a sport that doesn't require you to be ripped or swole or anything like that as well. And also for just people who just want to enjoy exercising. I want to make it very clear that while some people's goals at the gym may include things like weight loss, muscle gain, bodybuilding type of things, etc., that doesn't mean that in any way that someone who is very fat or very thin or just not super muscular in general, that person isn't able to be fit and healthy as well, because that is absolutely not true, as we will discuss later on. In fact, a lot of strong men and strong women and Olympic lifters can be very fat in addition to being very muscular. There's a lot of variety and a lot of body diversity when it comes down to these type of things. The main theme of today's video is going to center on the importance of recognizing every person's individual relationship with exercise. We've got a lot to cover today, which is why now is probably the best time to take a quick break and hear a word from today's sponsor, who kindly let me show off all my gains while modeling their products. One of the key topics that we're going to be covering in this video is the idea of reclaiming your own body and the importance of bodily autonomy. And if you've been on my channel before, you probably know that I went through a massive transformation in body confidence when I got breast reduction surgery almost 2 years ago. And after that surgery, I've been obsessed with finding cute bras to show off my body, especially now that I'm very comfortable in my body, and now I love to shop for cute bras. And the cute bra that I'm wearing today, right here, this cute bra, is from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Parade, a brand of super affordable and super cute lingerie and loungewear produced in soft, sustainable fabrics that I absolutely love modeling and showing off. Parade is a brand that has made it affordable to buy lots of cute new bras, plus I love the variety of styles and sizes that they come in. Even after surgery, I still have a fairly large chest. I wear a size 36 double D bra, so I'm thankful that Parade's bras come in a range of sizes, from extra small to 3XL, plus an additional range of sizes for those of us who tend to have a larger breast size. Fellow big boob friends out there, you probably know that it's not just about the size of the bra itself, but the proportion of the cup to the band size, which is why I found that shopping in the double D to F cup size range has helped me find bras that fit comfortably. Definitely use the sizing guide on the website to find your perfect fit, but if you want a reference point, I'm roughly 5'6" with a 39-inch chest and a 31-inch waist, and I buy bras in either their large size or 1.5 plus size when I'm choosing the big booby option. In this picture here, I'm modeling the perfect lace triangle bralette, which is super cute and comes in this adorable light purple color called Mood Ring. Here I'm wearing the Sheer Radiance triangle bralette in the pattern Techno Bloom. This bra is so soft, silky, and comfortable, and I love that it gives support without having underwires. And finally, one of my favorite new bras is the Radiant Flutter triangle bralette, which I love to wear when I'm showing off my gains that I got in the gym. If you're interested in trying Parade for yourself, head to my link in the description below, yourparade.com/rights50. Don't forget to use my code at checkout, rights50, to get 50% off on your order. Thank you so much to Parade for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into our topic. At the end of 2023, someone new became the main character of YouTube in the worst possible way. A new YouTube villain emerged by the name of James Somerton. Video essayist H Bomber Guy made a long video calling him out for plagiarizing a significant portion of his material, which is of course terrible and never okay. Then Todd in the Shadows, a channel who usually does music reviews, followed up with a lengthy video essay on why, whether or not James was plagiarizing a specific piece of material in question. Regardless, he got so many facts wrong about what he was posting. Now, I personally did not make a video on James Somerton, but I did get very angry at him for spreading lies about my friend Becky. I love you, Becky.
You're my boy, Blue!
Because discussions of James' plagiarism have already been covered very thoroughly, and I'd hate to just, copy someone else's points that they already made. That would be ironic in the worst possible way, not even like the fake Alanis kind of way. Shout out to Alanis Morissette for being a much cooler Canadian than James Somerton, though. But instead, I thought I would focus on one specific thing that James brought up, one specific fact that Todd in the Shadows called him out for getting wrong.
There's another video by the YouTuber intellect James Somerton from Canada, who I think is a really brilliant person, who actually does the cultural connection of what we now see as modern fitness culture with its roots in Nazi Germany.
Because this incorrect representation of an idea is what's going to drive the thesis for today's entire video essay. Let's take a look at what James said.
The Nazis invented our current body standards. This one's gonna take a bit. All right, this video is about how the Nazis had a body and fitness obsession inspired by old Greek and Roman statues, which is true, they totally did. And Somerton's thesis is that the Nazis' weird body thing influenced the entire rest of the Western world, particularly through American soldiers who fought in Europe.
But like any time Americans go traveling in Europe, they make sure to bring home some souvenirs. Mostly Nazi scientists, but also they brought back body fascism.
First, he says Americans enlisted in World War II because they were jealous of Nazi buffness.
As the globe suffered from malnutrition due to the food shortages of the Great Depression, or fattened up because the only food readily available was nutrient-poor and extremely high in carbs, seeing these svelte, attractive Germans marching down the streets of Berlin in newsreels created an air of inferiority for many, especially in America, which in no small amount contributed to the massive sign-ups when America joined the war.
Show me one historian that says that jealousy of hot German bodies was even remotely a motivating factor in enlistment. Only a third of the army enlisted voluntarily, most were drafted, and it's not like GIs could pick and choose which theater they fought in. Also, people didn't get fat during the Great Depression. They didn't have processed foods back then. What do you think, they were eating Funyuns? Secondly, Americans were even more jealous when they saw the Germans in person.
How did this come about? Well, soldiers coming home from World War II had seen the ridiculous bodies of Nazi soldiers and Nazi propaganda, and the mythical bodies that Nazis held up as perfection, and thought, oh, I can do better than that. And so a small subsect began trying to attain these bodies.
What the fuck are you talking about?
That's right, James called the people who did the Holocaust hot? and said that American fitness culture is built on fascism and thinking that fascist German boys are hot. On the surface, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. But when you look a little deeper, it's still ridiculous. James was wrong. Just last month, the University of Chicago Press released a new book called Fit Nation, The Gains and Pains of America's Exercise Obsession, written by Dr. Natalia Mehlman Petrzela, a historian and professor who studies how different elements of social justice intersect with everyday parts of life like fitness. This new book, Fit Nation, explores the history of fitness in the US during the past 2 centuries, including how different political movements helped popularize different forms of exercise, how fitness culture has kind of fluctuated in terms of which side of the political aisle claims it at that time, depending on world circumstances, and what various factors contribute towards demographics of people being most likely to participate in different types of exercise. This book talked a lot about bodybuilding, lifting weights, getting buff, all the stuff our friend James said was popularized in the US during World War II because of strong envy for hot enemy bodies.
New band name.
No. Ripped, buff bodies and hot, bulging muscles have actually been desirable in the US since the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, when German bodybuilder Eugene Sandow took the stage and wowed the great people of my city with his fantastic body. As the book Fit Nation says, the story of how exercise went from being a peculiar pursuit of the few to a universal preoccupation begins on the stage of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, where strongman Eugene Sandow preened and flexed at a time when sculpted muscles and exhibitionism made strongmen and women freaks and even sexual deviants. Who else would spend so much time working on their body and immodestly displaying it? But over time, these strong men and women sold the idea of exercise as a virtuous form of self-discipline, available to anyone willing to send away for a free pamphlet and to do the work it prescribed. Okay, but Savvy, you might be saying, those nasty German boys and their leader, the mustache man, they all love this concept of the Übermensch, right? Isn't it possible that maybe they still did popularize this in the US? After all, Sandow being paraded on stage during the World's Fair, isn't it possible that his body was just seen as some kind of freaky spectacle, like a circus act that we would gawk at rather than actually admire? No. As the book details, promoted as the world's most perfect man by famous showman Florin Ziegfeld, Sandow indeed presented a spectacle for the nearly 26 million visitors who streamed through the neoclassical Great White City. Through the summer and fall of 1893, fairgoers from all over the country gaped at eye-popping installations that showcased the extremes of human capacity. So his body was considered perfect back in 1893. Plus, he's kind of known for kicking off the love of bodybuilding for the public. He looked like this. And he's also speculated to have been bisexual and kind of a slut, since he was suspected to have been having affairs with both men and women. But what do I know? I've never met the guy. I'm just glad we have some bisexual slut representation in the weightlifting community. It's sorely needed for people like me who just want to be seen and understood. The impact of weightlifting culture goes far beyond Sandow. Throughout the book, Dr. Petrzela then goes on to detail how popular weightlifting became at places like Muscle Beach in California during the first half of the 20th century. In terms of World War II connections, there were 2 that were kind of expanded on in this book. First, that forms of exercise became popular among women while the men in their lives were drafted, and second, that after World War II, presidents like Eisenhower and Kennedy actually had a fairly difficult time selling parents on physical education programs in schools because the regimented exercises looked too militarized and kind of reminded people a little too much of the war that had just ended. So it was basically like the opposite of what James said. So why did I bring this up? Well, it turns out that James Somerton is far from unique in having this sort of misunderstanding. In fact, as I've been getting more and more into gym culture during the past few years, I've noticed that a lot of people have misconceptions like this, that working out, especially in sports like powerlifting or boxing or MMA fighting, and especially in places like bodybuilding, a sport that requires you to strive for specific muscle to fat ratios, that those sports are only for toxic alpha males on the alt-right, and that leftists and feminists don't belong in that space and should go back to fat acceptance TikTok. This idea has been everywhere. Let's look at an old MSNBC article that went viral a few years back for this very topic.
MSNBC is facing ridicule online after a year-old opinion piece on, quote, fascist fitness groups resurfaced, titled Why the Far Right is Really into Home Fitness, White Supremacists' Latest Scheme to Valorize Violence and Hypermasculinity.
From the get-go, the title of the article is already provocative. Pandemic fitness trends have gone extreme. Literally, white supremacists' latest scheme to valorize violence and hypermasculinity has gone digital. Well, that sounds intense. As columnist Cynthia Miller-Idris writes, it appears the far right has taken advantage of pandemic at-home fitness trends to expand its decade-plus radicalization of physical mixed martial arts, MMA, and combat sports spaces. Physical fitness has always been central to the far right. In Mein Kampf, Hitler fixated on boxing and jiu-jitsu, believing they could help him create an army of millions whose aggressive spirit and impeccably trained bodies, combined with fanatical love of the fatherland, would do more for the German nation than any mediocre tactical weapons training. The intersection of extremism and fitness leads into a shared obsession with the male body, training, masculinity, testosterone, strength, and competition. Physical fitness training, especially in combat sports, appeals to the far right for many reasons. Fighters are trained to accept significant physical pain, to be warriors, and to embrace the messaging around solidarity, heroism, and brotherhood. It's championed as a tool to help fight the coming race war and the street battles that will precede it. Recruits are encouraged to link individual moral virtues such as willpower, decisiveness, and courage with desired collective traits such as virility and manliness. This also works in reverse, with white supremacists encouraging potential recruits or activists to stay in good physical shape as a way of managing self-presentation to the public. The neo-Nazi blogger Andrew Anglin advised his followers that fat people should be required to commit to losing weight if they are to stay involved with groups or in-person gatherings, noting that continued obesity should not be tolerated. Now, to be fair, we do have to note that nowhere in this article does it say that only far-right weirdos are the ones working out, because that's absolutely untrue, as I'm going to prove pretty thoroughly in today's video. But this article wasn't the only source drawing parallels between general gym culture and the alt-right. Just look at TikTok and Twitter, two of the social media platforms where you can find tons of people arguing over whether or not just the act of losing weight in a vacuum, of losing body fat, of gaining muscle, or having specific goals for your body, whether that in itself is inherently a far right-wing and eugenicist idea. As I saw people saying on Twitter, if you're posting before and after weight loss photos, insisting that anyone will find a reason to be triggered no matter what, you can delude yourself as much as you want, but in posting those pictures, you are upholding white supremacy, telling us that only smaller bodies are worthy. I don't care who does it or why they do it. Let me be perfectly clear. The act of intentional weight loss is fatphobic and anti-fat. You cannot lose weight intentionally without your actions reinforcing the anti-fat idea that anyone can just lose weight. The reply to this says, I guess the people on my 600-pound life are fatphobic because they want to live longer and be able to move more freely. Yeah, that makes sense. To which the original poster replied, well, since losing weight guarantees neither of those, yeah, basically, lots of people are thin and die young and have mobility issues. Lots of super fat people live long and move just fine. We're going to get into details about this later, so just sit tight. This person said, all yesterday showed me is that even the most self-proclaimed feminists still carry internalized fat phobia. Even the most self-proclaimed feminists can be hypocrites, bullies, and lie for personal benefit. Tackling fat phobia shows who people really are under the feminist facade. To which someone replied, intentional weight loss is inherently fatphobic. It's not up to straight-sized folk to define fat phobia. So then someone posted a picture that said, we're canceling each other over our gym takes today, post your cancelable gym take, and someone quote tweeted it saying, all intentional weight loss is fatphobic. I am willing to die on this hill. This was a small sample, but I saw this all over Twitter. And then here is what was happening on TikTok.
Fatphobia is tied to racism through eugenics.
It's not healthy to lose weight. It's not healthy to have intentional weight loss.
It says stop saying body positive if you support and participate in intentional weight loss. That is not what the BOPO movement is about.
Guys, I am being bullied just for losing weight. I'm being held accountable for the harm that I'm causing in this community that I, created and profited from or whatever.
Just bold enough to post eugenics on Maine. I don't know.
Be careful on what you say and what you are perpetuating. Because it's all tied to racism and eugenics.
It says, I've literally seen people say it's fatphobic to work out because not wanting to be fat is fatphobic.
I hate to tell you this, but actively not wanting to be fat is indeed fatphobic.
Also, you want your partner to be healthy. So no matter what, they have to be healthy. Whose definition of healthy? In addition to that, do you want to just say that you like eugenics? Because the idea here is that you really need a partner to be, capable and healthy and this, survivor of the fittest. But it's health comes and goes.
You're being a racist when you start promoting weight loss.
Okay, so if all weight loss is fatphobia and fatphobia is tied to sexism and racism, does that mean I have to join the far right because I'm on a cut right now? When I change to going back to bulking in the spring, Can I be a feminist and promote race and class equality again? Do I have to stop doing that right now because I'm doing a cut, which means I'm losing weight because that's what a cut is? I know that's an extreme oversimplification, and we're going to get into the nuances, so don't worry. But these are the two extremes that I've seen starting to form on the opposite sides of the body science spectrum. In 2017, there was an article from Vice called "Gym Bros More Likely to Be Right-Wing Assholes. Science Confirms." To all you gym bro haters amongst us, come be seated, this one's for you. Science, objective, empirically tested science, the science that tells us that the ice caps are melting, has confirmed what many of us have long suspected. Gym bros are right-wing jerks.
You're a monster.
New research from Brunel University finds that physically strong men who regularly go to the gym are more likely to be right-wing and support social and economic inequality than weaker men. The findings that rich muscle dudes are the worst. Under those rock-hard abs lie the rock-hard souls of men who don't believe in spreading their riches around. It's basically your tolerance to the idea that wealth shouldn't be redistributed, Dr. Price explains. Some people thought it was horrible, some people thought it was fine. Fascinatingly, the longer men spent in the gym, the more likely they were to have less egalitarian socioeconomic beliefs. But is the gym turning men into entitled, unempathetic jerks, or are they in the gym because they were born that way? It's a real chicken breast and egg white omelet conundrum, to be sure. Now, I really wasn't a fan of the reporting in this article. I thought it was kind of mean. In the writer's attempts to have a creative voice, the way it ended up coming across is like they're a bitter asshole who just finds gym bros annoying and is glad that they finally found a justifiable reason to hate someone that they actually just found annoying before. Now that's what I say as a gym bro myself, although I'm a woman who's very against the right wing, but that's from my very limited, unscientific, anecdotal perspective. In that perspective, I can say that no, going to the gym has not made me want to hoard wealth.
1 miniature combination Russian phrase book and Bible.
At the same time, the idea behind the study is definitely interesting and worth reading into. The study was conducted in London, so I'm not sure how much everything applies equally to US politics, which can be similar in some ways and very different in others, but still, the information was interesting. As the report on Brunel University's website reads, Dr. Michael Price and colleagues assisted 171 men aged 18 to 40 collecting information on height, weight, waist size, flexed and relaxed muscle circumference, hand grip, and arm and chest strength. They also surveyed participants on how often they go to the gym, their wealth, whether they support the redistribution of wealth, and whether they approve of the idea that some social groups should have dominance over others. As well as focusing on bodily signs of perceived dominance, the researchers also focused on facial appearance. They had groups of independent raters view participants' faces and rate whether they saw the men as dominant and attractive. They also used software to analyze faces in terms of masculinity of their shape. Prior research has shown several aspects of face shape appearance, such as height to width ratio, are linked to ability to compete for resources in the modern world. The results showed a significant correlation between those with higher bodily formidability and the belief that some social groups should dominate others. These men were much less likely to support redistribution of wealth. But contrary to predictions, there was no correlation between being considered attractive as measured by waist to chest ratio and various facial features and whether or not the men supported social dominance, orientation, or redistribution. The study showed that more muscular men were less egalitarian, and the number of hours actually spent in the gym was also linked to having less egalitarian socioeconomic beliefs. So like I said, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly how scientific it was, or like how scientific in general it is to do things like, quote, analyze faces in terms of the masculinity of their shape, things like that. But hey, studies can be very hit or miss. It's an interesting topic to look into. Regardless, it's no secret that many far right-wing influencers equate the left and the straw-constructed boogeyman of leftists with being out of shape and averse to going to the gym. Here's what Tim Pool and friends have to say about it.
So what we see here is, I suppose, virtue signaling, perpetuating a cycle of decay and destruction in this country. But instead of hearing things like, why not take some vitamin D and get some sunlight and breathe some fresh air and get some exercise, we hear everything has to align perfectly with whatever tribe people find themselves in. This woman, it's fat shaming to point out a fact.
I do have to say that this was actually probably my biggest red pill when I was 11 years old. I looked at what feminism had to say about the fat acceptance movement, and I was like, are you effing joking?
One of my favorite memes is all the pretty obese health bureaucrats that were deciding on people's health. And Joe Rogan made a very kind of interesting point about this.
Let's look at other big right-wing influencers like Brett Cooper and Steven Crowder.
I'm sure we all know those claims about working out that are going around social media and have been for the last year. So I've done a couple of episodes about these, but you know, if you go to the gym, you are apparently fatphobic. If you care about your figure, then you also hate fat people. If you enjoy gym culture and working out, you are most likely a scary alt-right person, or you are being indoctrinated by one of those crazy conservatives that cares about their health, God forbid.
It is irresponsible to come on an app where there are vulnerable young people.
You know, it's also really irresponsible around young people to be overweight and glorifying obesity. I don't know.
Continuing with the social justice activism panels at South by Southwest, Not Gay Jared and I attended the My Body Is Not Safe for Work Fat Pride breakout session to ask a few simple, medically accurate, if mildly triggering questions.
The fact that people who are overweight, like myself, or obese, are 3 to 7 times more likely to develop diabetes or cost $256 billion more per year isn't that a concern of the taxpayer?
The title of Crowder's video is Undercover SJW Fat Pride Feminist Panel Crashed by Crowder. Because for people with this worldview, fat is equivalent to feminism, to being a social justice warrior, to everything that is the opposite of their ideology. It all goes together. On top of this, of course, there was Jordan Peterson's massive "if I can't get hard to a Sports Illustrated photo, then that indicates the downfall of Western society" tantrum that he had on Twitter about a year ago. Plus, we can't forget Dave Rubin, whose book I reviewed about 2.5 years ago, which was right around the time I was starting to fall in love with lifting weights in the first place. We're still on page 175 when he says, "Don't believe me? Fine, but just take a quick look at our most vocal critics. It's no coincidence that social justice warriors are often frequently out of shape, poorly dressed, and have messy hair, along with their overall disheveled appearance. If some dress for success, they dress for failure." My conclusion to this section: Dave, there's only one way to determine which one of us is more in shape, and that is YouTuber boxing match! Email's in the description below. Dave, hit me up, we'll get a pay-per-view boxing match scheduled, and we will make fucking bank, okay? Savvy versus Dave, 3 minutes in the ring, let's do it. That was right after I started lifting. Look at cute younger Savvy with her enormous pre-surgery titties and her ugly-ass haircut. A guy on Reddit told me that I looked like Gordon Ramsay, but with the tits of Pam from Archer. And bless him, he was right. So why is this currently such a thing? Why has gym culture become so politicized? Why are so many people equating being ripped and shredded with being conservative? Why is it that so many people think that the left can't lift?
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.
Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to my channel. Savvy Writes Books. We talk about books and business, and we do video essays and book reviews here. It's a good time. Before we get deeper into our topic, I want to give a thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel and for helping me continue to make videos like this. Names are up on the screen. Check out my description below where you can see the list of my Patreon supporters, plus links that they can promote in my description as well. Throughout this video, I'm going to be interviewing a few fellow YouTubers who have their own individual perspectives on this topic, including their own areas of expertise from various sides of this issue. Those people include Megan Ann, a YouTuber who talks about a variety of topics related to the fitness world. She makes videos trying to sort through what's real and what's fake when it comes to fitness influencer lies versus body positivity stuff, what's real, what's pseudoscience, all of that. She's a queer leftist woman, so I'm looking forward to sharing her story and takes with you.
My name is Megan Ann. My channel started as me talking about my experience having weight loss surgery 5 years or almost 6 years ago now, and the whole experience with that as like a younger person having it. And now it has kind of evolved into like a commentary channel surrounding like fat activism, my issues with it, why I kind of agree with it, and that kind of stuff, and how it kind of just sits in society.
Additionally, we will be talking to Brianna Jewell, a friend of the channel who's been on here before, who is a certified personal trainer and often uses her channel to speak out against the scams in the fitness industry, especially shady multi-level marketing companies that try to sell you those get fit quick schemes.
Hi, friends. My name is Brianna. I'm a certified personal trainer, a big, huge biology nerd, and I am a registered dietitian to be. I am currently a dietetic intern. I'm completing a dietetic internship, and my projected graduation date is April, and then I expect to earn my licensure and become a registered dietitian in 2024. I'm also, like I said, a personal trainer.
Overachiever.
Then we have Obese to Beast, a fitness YouTuber who documented his journey of losing well over 100 pounds and keeping that weight off for now an entire decade, plus his journey of falling in love with weightlifting along the way, who has also dealt with a lot of stereotypes, assumptions, and backlash online because he's a progressive guy, he's an LGBTQ ally, and not all the gym bros out there are happy about that.
My name's John, or also known on Instagram and YouTube as Obese to Beast. I've been making YouTube videos for a long time, since I think I started my channel in 2014, so it's been 10 years now. So I lost a lot of weight, and then I make YouTube videos talking about weight loss, and then recently that's turned more into commentary videos about fitness and weight loss, I guess is the shortened version of that.
And finally, we will be talking to Kat Benson, registered dietitian and owner of the practice Unlocked Nutrition, a company that takes a weight-neutral approach toward healthy eating. She was also my dietitian when I was recovering from surgery 2 years ago.
My name is Kat Benson. I'm a licensed and registered dietitian nutritionist, and I started really getting into nutrition as a teenager, being in athletics my entire life. And I really realized the impact that nutrition played on my performance and my recovery. Part of my story does contain a little bit of being in an MLM and seeing seeing more about the damages that multi-level marketing, nutrition related ones especially, I mean, all of them, I don't support any multi-level marketing company, but the nutrition ones have a lot of times not so helpful, not so great nutrition programs paired alongside of them. And so I decided to talk more about that. And so I make videos discussing, doing deep dives, talking about nutrition related MLMs. And then I started to get a lot more clients, a lot more people who were reaching out to me wanting to work with me to help them to move away from not only toxic dieting behaviors, but also like the nutrition related MLMs, because it was kind of a challenge to just, stop, especially if they did still want to have some focus and intention around their physical health. So really coming at it from a weight neutral perspective, helping them with actions to implement in a consistent way that's not going to be as like strict, or that's not going to be as kind of like yo-yo dieting kind of things that they previously were a part of.
How did I first get interested in researching this topic and making a massive video about it?
Tell me why.
It all started with this podcast I used to listen to called Mind Pump. As my Instagram states, I have 2 hobbies and exactly 2 hobbies, and those are lifting weights and playing with dolls. As a result, I listen to 2 podcasts, and 2 podcasts alone. The biggest one is Dolls of Our Lives. Shout out to Dolls of Our Lives. I love them. The other one previously was a weightlifting podcast called Mind Pump, which is hosted by a panel of fitness trainers. When I was getting into lifting back in 2021, this podcast was such an excellent listen. It had plenty of advice for people just getting started lifting, including great tips on how to build habits, avoid burnout, and how to add things to your life rather than depriving yourself of things. But then one day, a couple months ago, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a preview of their newest episode in my feed. Instead of being about fitness, the episode that popped up was titled Modern Dating and Building Lasting Relationships, and I thought that's not going to help my gains.
What do you bench? 400.
But I gave it a listen. Their guest is a relationship coach who's ironically named Adam Smith. I mean, he can't actually help what his name is. I just think it's funny that he's named Adam Smith. Now, of course, you can make the argument that if you're in a healthy relationship, when your mental health is strong, then you can focus better on fitness and exercise and have better results there. Sure. But again, I listen to this podcast for weightlifting advice, and if someone is a dating or relationship coach, that usually signals one of 2 things. A, they're a big boss babe scammer trying to sell you on their shitty course, or B, they're just a full-on red pillar. But I couldn't judge what I hadn't listened to, so I gave it a listen.
As far as a culture, we live in the rubble of a culture that used to function. A lot of it's with sex, having sex on the first date. Most women don't want to have sex on the first date, but they think they have to. Being interesting rewards them online, being interesting with sex. I mean, social media influencers, social media influencers, right? They get on TikTok. They have a big following on TikTok, and then, you know what? I'll get on OnlyFans. I'll show my butt. I'll make some money. I'll take care of grandma, and I'll be interesting and get a ton of views, and I'll feel so good about myself because I'm interesting, and that is the only thing I can ever really be. I'll never be loved or accepted, but I can at least be interesting and get people's eyes on me. If you're dating and you're the red pill and you're mad at me now, totally understandable. I'm going to teach you a better method that's actually sustainable, that won't make you feel like you're victimizing insecure women. Our society teaches women that every man is a rapist. Every man is out to you're going to get married, then he's just going to start punching you in the eye every single day because the meatloaf is cold or overcooked, or he's not going to care about you or your kids. He's going to cheat on you as the first chance he gets. Men are painted as these horrible beasts who are nothing but a bundle of awful desires that hurt other people in the moment you give them power. Women need to say, I respect you to their husband, right? For men, respect is often more important than love. Most men, yeah, I'd like to be loved, but I need to be respected. Most women are utterly petrified of giving men even an ounce of control or elevated status because they were so let down by their own dad, or their mom poisoned them against men. You look at OnlyFans and the rise of it, and how a lot of young women are getting into it. And it feels like every woman on the earth must be doing OnlyFans. Every single woman is a prostitute. Okay, I've heard that before, right? Red pill circles will talk about this. Men also fear, and rightly so, legal or financial destruction. We have all heard stories about what one night stands, right? Hook up regret, and how women then turn around. She cheated on her boyfriend. Now she files a rape report on you because she didn't like how it went. You didn't give her enough orgasms the night before, whatever it is. And now you have some rape charges on you. Very quickly, this turns around. Absolute financial destruction.
Okay, I'm sorry. What does any of that have to do with weightlifting? We're just gonna go out here and make a ton of gender essentialist claims with no proof to back it up on a weightlifting podcast, and the audience loved it. I mean, not me. I basically stopped listening to them after this, but all the top comments were things like 100% on point. This is fire. I'm getting all the gains after finding this podcast. No, sorry. Shaming women who do OnlyFans does not make your muscles grow. That is fake news. Notice how this guy mentioned red pillars a couple times, saying he was going to tell them something different than what they've heard in red pill circles, implying that red pillars were listening. He was saying you. He was talking to them in the second person. So I was like, okay, they've done a few episodes with this dude. Maybe he's a personal friend of theirs. Maybe it's an occasional thing, and maybe the focus is going to stay on weightlifting itself. Maybe we're not going to try to intertwine weightlifting with just full-on incel shit.
You're so naive. You are so naive.
And then They had Jordan Peterson on the show. But savvy, you might be saying, Jordan Peterson has a PhD. He's a licensed psychologist. He was a longtime professor at the University of Toronto. Maybe he has some expert knowledge to share about things like the effects of weightlifting on your psychological health.
You're so naive.
And that would be a very charitable thing of you to think. Normally, I try to be charitable too, but it was hard to be when the episode was titled, "The Story They're Telling You Is a Lie." Who's they? What story? You've done it, JP. You've piqued my interest, so now we have to give it a listen.
So we have this idea in our culture that's a materialist and an atheist idea, and even a Marxist idea at core, that there is such a thing as natural resources. So there's just the wealth of the earth, and it's laying around waiting to be picked up. And then the people who pick it up and hoard it are the evil capitalists, and they're oppressing everyone else. And every bit of that's a lie. We're trying to put forward a notion of identity that is technically, it's a subsidiary identity. It's predicated on the idea that you're not in your head. You're not subjectively defined. You exist in relationship to other people necessarily. Like, you have to take care of yourself, and that's an integrative act because you have to get your whims under control. You have to treat yourself responsibly and well over the long run, not only in the moment. And then if you're mature enough to do that, maybe you can join with someone else, wife or husband optimally, for a long-term relationship, and you can build something out of that. And then that's part of your identity. It's not subjective. That gives you identity at multiple levels of what inclusion. That's a good way of thinking about it, something the lefties might be happy about. And as you get better and better at that, you can bring more people together. And that's the basic flaw in diversity theory and multicultural theory. Well, wherever there's multiculturalism, there's conflict between cultures and there's war. And so the price you pay for a fragmented narrative is war. One of the core claims of postmodernism is that there's no uniting narrative. Okay, no uniting meta-narrative. And it's a preposterous claim, partly because every action you undertake is a consequence of a uniting narrative. The leftists insist that the narrative that has united us in the past at every social level is one of power. And it's unbelievably cynical, that viewpoint. It's not true. The median liberal female is more likely than not to be diagnosed with a mental illness. Most of them won't be married. Most of them won't have children. And you might say, well, that's fine if they don't want to have children. It's like, it's not so simple. So this is what the data show right now. This is brutal. It's brutal. 50% of women who are 30 don't have a child. When you're, say, between 20 and 35 and you're young and you're fit and you're beautiful and you're attractive and you have the possibility of multiple relationships, say, maybe with the proper relationship is the goal. But that's not so fun by the time you're 45.
Fathers were always presented as bumbling idiots or, oh my gosh, I'm married, life is over. And the guy who wasn't married, he's got the fast cars, all the girls, that's the way you should go.
He's Andrew Tate. Every single man is Andrew Tate.
That's probably the scariest part about it, because there's a lot of things that we've talked about Andrew before, and there's a lot of things that he says that I agree with.
If you're demoralized and dependent and neurotic and afraid, and you see a tough guy who basically says, up yours to the world.
Up yours, woke moralist.
If you're demoralized and dependent and neurotic and afraid, and you see a tough guy who basically says, up yours.
Up yours, woke moralist.
And you see a tough guy who basically says, up yours.
Up yours.
I think I actively lost muscle listening to that. After that episode, they had an episode with Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela, to talk about her all-meat diet. This podcast that I used to like, which used to talk to women and men equally in terms of workout advice, was now trying to separate people, push weird pseudoscience about innate sexual desires and the qualities that are different between men and women, even going so far as to say that Andrew Tate has good points sometimes. I couldn't help but find this extremely, extremely weird. Plus, the more fitness content I was consuming on Instagram and YouTube, the more I started getting recommended anti-feminist and anti-LGBTQ creators. But why? What was the connection? Actually, one of the people that I talked to for this video, John from the channel Obese to Beast, has a video from 2 years ago talking about how years before that, in the midst of his life as a gym bro, it was Jordan Peterson that almost led him down the alt-right pipeline himself until he took a step back and reevaluated his beliefs.
The first person that kind of got me down that pipeline, it's called like the alt-right pipeline, was I found Jordan Peterson. Watching his videos and the content that he makes led me down this rabbit hole, for lack of a better term. I end up watching some Jordan Peterson stuff. I end up reading his book, most of it. He's like, yeah, personal responsibility, take care of yourself, don't worry about what others say. Like, it's all about you. You have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which I was like, yeah, dude, I agree with that. I lost 180 pounds. I changed my entire life. And it's all because of me. I remember thinking that, right? Through watching Jordan Peterson, I found Ben Shapiro.
I think this is a good example of how gym culture can lead a lot of gym guys, especially young men in particular, into dangerous sets of beliefs, even to following toxic male role models who aren't really even affiliated with the gym in any way. John ended up changing his beliefs to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which led him to then receiving a lot of backlash from his fellow gym bro friends for going woke and going soft and going soy.
With everything with this pandemic going on, and then just the mounting pressures and the mounting just insanity of the 2020 BLM protests, and me even saying that like, yo, I agree that Black Lives do matter, and just being absolutely attacked. So some of the comments. So I'm not going to show, I was thinking about showing these, but I don't want to like put these people's name on blast, but I'm just going to read them out. All the rings and fingernail polish and bracelets, trying too hard. Blue hair, painted nails, things are getting kind of weird, dude. This one, Jesus Christ loves you and cares for you. Have a good day, everyone. It's been a while since I've watched you and your videos. Wow, you've changed. Don't like the new obese beast. He's acting too woke now. What happened to you? You went from worshiping God in church to coloring your nails and painting your hair. What the fluff is going on with the blue hair and painted nails? What's up with the nail polish for men? Man, you're so gay now, LMAO.
Now, before we dive into more of the specifics of this situation, let's break down a simplified version of the philosophies involved. When people talk about the right, or the left, or leftists, or conservatives, or the alt-right, those terms can mean a lot of different things based on context, like what country you're from, what specific issues you're talking about, where you define the center in the first place, which can vary based on your city, your country, or whether you're looking at a global scale, all of that. So in this video, when I talk about the right and the left, here's what I mean. On average, the right tends to be more individualist. That's the basis behind economic systems like capitalism. It's what's behind the popular 1980s theory of Reaganomics, wherein Ronald Reagan claimed that wealth could trickle down, and that leaving the market as free as possible and avoiding tax increases on the rich would benefit us all.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
The concept of freedom to the fiscal conservative comes from the freedom to prioritize yourself financially, which is why people on the right are often in favor of lower taxes for everyone, even billionaires, and often don't support public social programs like government-subsidized healthcare. This mentality is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps idea. It's the no one is in charge of your future but you mindset. And in a lot of ways, that's the mindset that makes people successful at the gym. Making the investment to go to the gym, then going to the gym multiple times a week. That's all an individual choice that you will make to benefit yourself. And in order to see progress, especially significant muscle gains, that requires a lot of focus on the self. It requires you to think of yourself as in control of your own destiny, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to keep yourself motivated every day. On top of that, if you love capitalism like many right-wing influencers do, then you probably don't see much of an issue with the diet industry. Using this perspective, companies like Weight Watchers or Beachbody have every right to sell people get slim quick programs because those people consented to paying for it, and we have a free market where people can vote with their dollars. These companies aren't taking advantage of people's health concerns. Within the framework of this ideology, these companies are just selling a product and people are choosing with their own free will to buy said product, and therefore nothing unethical could possibly be happening. Now, I disagree with that viewpoint, but I think that could be part of the connection here. So let's talk about what the left is in this context. The left tends to be more collectivist and examine issues on a societal level, which shows that the work hard, see results mindset doesn't always work in such a direct and linear way. Additionally, on a social level, leftists tend to care about promoting equality and body size, including height, weight, body fat percentage, etc. Those create demographics of people, and it's natural that people who are in support of equality for all would care that no particular demographic of people is facing prejudice or discrimination due to any set of qualities. People on the left are also more likely to realize that being a ripped gym bro isn't as easy as controlling your own destiny, that for a lot of people systemic factors come into play. Like nowadays, it's much easier for lower income people to become overweight due to things like food deserts or a lack of grocery stores and fresh foods available in lower income neighborhoods, often causing people to rely on things like convenience store food or fast food just to get their daily nutrients. Meats and protein are expensive, carbs and sugars are cheap. Plus, it's not just about the cost, it's also about the time. If someone's a single parent with a below average income, they might be working multiple jobs to support themselves and their kids, not leaving much time to meal plan or to cook. And if the nearest grocery store is miles away, then yeah, it might be most time and cost efficient to eat fast food or shitty processed food. As a result, a lot of leftists, myself included, are very against the idea that viewing being fat or unhealthy or unfit as any type of moral failure, because we can recognize that our life circumstances are a complicated mix of things that extend beyond just our personal choices. But then, on the more extreme ends of these spectrums, we see where things start to wrap around, do a little horseshoe theory thing, get just a little bit paradoxical. For example, you might have a hardcore individualist capitalist who believes in individual freedom for all, but then gets angry at fat people just for existing, saying their presence in public in and of itself is somehow promoting obesity or promoting an unhealthy lifestyle.
You know, it's also really irresponsible around young people to be overweight and glorifying obesity. I don't know.
I mean, those are individual people just living their lives. They live their lives, you live yours. Remember freedom?
America, freedom.
You see people like Steven Crowder claiming that obesity is a drain on our healthcare system.
People who are overweight, like myself, or obese, are 3 to 7 times more likely to develop diabetes or cost $256 billion more per year. Isn't that a concern of the taxpayer? Don't they have a right to have an opinion?
What that healthcare system, Steven. Nobody told me Americans had healthcare yet. And on the other side, we have a lot of people on the left who claim that bodily autonomy, in particular bodily autonomy for women, is extremely important and needs to be protected, and that we shouldn't judge women for the choices that they make for their own bodies. But then we see example of some of these same feminists claiming that losing weight is in itself a fatphobic act.
I hate to tell you this, but actively not wanting to be fat is indeed fatphobic.
Or that by creating goals to have a specific body type, like if you want to be a bodybuilder or something, then that's problematic because you're sending the message that fat women aren't equal.
You're being a racist when you start promoting weight loss.
Now, to be fair, I do think that these more paradoxical ways of thinking are the extreme ends of the spectrum in my personal experience, but we can acknowledge multiple things at once. That fitness and working out can be good for you, and for a lot of us can be a very fun hobby, but that systemic inequality does play a role in how people are able to maintain their physical health, and that in particular, wealthier people are going to have a much easier time doing so because wealthier people have an easier time doing anything.
I love money.
As the book Fit Nation explains, fitness is a slippery concept, but it's hard to deny that the United States is far from physically fit by any number of measures. Only 20% of Americans work out consistently, over half of gym members barely use their expensive facilities, and fewer than 3 out of 10 high school students get 60 minutes of exercise a day. Socioeconomic status only intensifies this phenomenon. 80% of Americans live in a fitness desert, defined as an area without a public park in a half-mile radius. Physical education is often summarily cut from under-resourced schools or taught by an educator without specialized training, yet the field has become so anemic that schools struggle to find physical educators for the few positions that do exist. Even as the United States remains so much the locus of global commercial fitness that Parisian exercise studios market New York City boot camps and California bodies, this country attracts international attention for its relentlessly rising obesity rates, which are especially pronounced among the poor and people of color. Social critics rightly reject the moral panic over the, quote, obesity epidemic as driven by fat hatred trussed up as genuine health concerns, especially in perpetuating the idea that fat people are always unfit and that obesity is always the underlying cause of ill health. But it is worth asking whether Americans have the freedom, flexibility, and safe physical spaces to be active in the ways they would choose. The pandemic has worsened this situation as economic insecurity and the enforced sedentariness of quarantines has made regular exercise an even greater rarity. And on top of socioeconomic status, issues like sexism and racism can absolutely contribute to barriers to entry into the fitness world in the first place. Fit Nation has an entire section about how back in around the 1960s through 1990s, even though the activities of running and jogging were promoted as being for everyone, people other than white men often struggled to enter these fields, especially when it came to things like marathon racing, or else they might face prejudice. One of the main stories about this phenomenon is the story of Kathrine Switzer, the first woman to run the Boston Marathon back in 1967. She was only even admitted into the marathon in the first place because she registered herself under her initials instead of using the name Kathrine, so that way the officials wouldn't even know that she was female. Once she got to the race, she faced threats and harassment from male runners. At one point during the race, Jock Semple, co-director of the Boston Marathon, charged after Switzer and assaulted her, claiming that having a woman run in the Boston Marathon was threatening the race's sanctity. As Switzer wrote in her memoir, instinctively, I jerked my head around quickly and looked square into the most vicious face I'd ever seen. A big man, a huge man with bared teeth, was set to pounce, and before I could react, he grabbed my shoulder and flung me back, screaming, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers." Semple was attempting to rip Switzer's number off of her shirt so that she would no longer be an official runner in the marathon. Over time, the Boston Marathon eventually began to allow women, and in 1974, Switzer was the winner of the women's division of the race. While the 1970s saw a slow reckoning around the idea of women being allowed to be athletic, especially with the passage of Title IX, there was still racial inequality in fitness to contend with. As Fit Nation explains, despite their somewhat awkward engagement with gender, most boosters remained virtually silent on how race shaped the experience of jogging. Cooper and Bowerman's universalist descriptions of running as a free, easy, relaxing activity available to anyone at any age who could summon the will to lace up their rubber-soled sneakers and head out the door overlooked the fact that, especially as suburbanization had left inner cities without a vital tax base, many African Americans lived in neighborhoods that lacked safe parks and streets and faced suspicion if they jogged through the majority white neighborhoods from which they had been deliberately excluded. Tellingly, jogging overwhelmingly featured images of white runners. Fix notably quoted Black elite runners and New York Road Runners founding President Ted Corbett describing running as having your own psychiatrist, benefiting everyone in ways they recognize and in ways they don't. Corbett was the grandson of enslaved people and grew up in South Carolina, where running meant racing to do chores on his family cotton farm, and his adolescent running career was always conditioned by the fear of the reception he would receive as a Black teenager. The color line was drawn, he later remembered. There were track meets, but I was a little reluctant to take part in them because I didn't know what problems I would have getting a place to stay and something to eat. heat. Yet, in a reflection of either his progressivism or obliviousness to the challenges Corbett faces as a black man, Fix didn't mention Corbett's race when quoting him, identifying him only as soft-spoken and understated. But savvy, you might be thinking, okay, so you're talking about prejudice in the fitness realms of the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, but what about today? It's 2024 now. Haven't things gotten any better?
Of course!
Really?
I mean, yeah, of course things have gotten better, but they're not entirely fixed. Just a couple months ago, at the end of 2023, a CrossFit gym in Seattle was the target of a huge controversy surrounding anti-LGBTQ hate. CrossFit is in itself a bit of a controversial topic, so let's start with the basics. What is CrossFit? According to CrossFit's own website, CrossFit is a fitness program that produces measurable outcomes through lifestyle changes centered on training and nutrition. Workouts consist of constantly varied, high-intensity, functional movements and are most fun and effective among friends at a local CrossFit gym. CrossFit is a series of gyms, or sometimes a smaller version is called a box, where people train in specific exercises, usually exercises that are variations of typical strength training and cardio moves like squats and box jumps, things like that. But also sometimes they have their own little twist. CrossFit also hosts a yearly competition called the CrossFit Games, and they have a lot of buff ladies that compete that I enjoy following on Instagram. The CrossFit world has, however, dealt with its fair share of controversies over the years. The most common probably being that people love to ask if CrossFit is a cult, to which the answer is, that's very complicated. But the biggest controversies within CrossFit have been at the hands of the program's founder, Greg Glassman. As the New York Times reported in 2020, when Greg Glassman resigned earlier this month as chief executive of CrossFit, excoriated with comments about George Floyd's death on Twitter and in a Zoom meeting, people who have worked there were surprised that his downfall was tied to accusations of racism. They had assumed that the reason would be routine and rampant sexual harassment. That's a hell of a way to start an article. Glassman, what a guy, what a character. The article continues, interviews with 8 former employees and 4 CrossFit athletes with strong ties to the company reveal a management culture rife with overt and vulgar talk about women, their bodies, how much male employees, primarily Mr. Glassman, would like to have sex with them, and how lucky the women should feel to have his rabid interest. According to the dozen interviewed, Mr. Glassman, 63, has verbally demeaned women, pulled at their clothes to try to peek at their cleavage, and aimed his phone's camera to snap photos of their breasts while they traveled with him for work, sometimes pressuring them to consider sharing hotel rooms or borrowed houses with him. Through a company spokesman and spokeswoman, Mr. Glassman denied such conduct. So Glassman remained in denial about the sexist misconduct, so it ended up being his racism that caused his resignation, since I guess there was maybe more explicit proof of that. As NPR reported in 2020, Greg Glassman, the outspoken founder and CEO of CrossFit, resigned Tuesday, days after he made inflammatory remarks about the nationwide protest in support of Black Lives Matter. Athletes, gyms, Reebok, and other athletic companies have been distancing themselves from the CrossFit brand over the controversy. Members of the CrossFit community pressured Glassman and the company to issue anti-racist statements in support of Black Lives Matter. Glassman resisted the pressure, calling an affiliate gym owner delusional in an email for her suggestion. Then, when the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation tweeted that racism is a public health issue, Glassman replied, "It's Floyd-19," apparently comparing the death of George Floyd to the coronavirus. Glassman's resignation did not end prejudice in the CrossFit world, however. In September of 2023, Gabrielle Castle posted an opinion piece to the CrossFit-centered news website Morning Chalk Up, a piece entitled "The Case for Moving Away from Gendered Weights." Here's what it said. If you've ever stepped a nanoclad foot into a CrossFit box, odds are you've heard the 35-pound, 15-kilogram barbell called a women's barbell and a 45-pound, 20-kilogram barbell called a men's barbell. But gendering a barbell is not only inaccurate, it's also just plain silly. That's why activist and owner of Rocket Community Fitness, Alyssa Royce, urges CrossFit box owners and coaches to designate barbells and prescribed weights in different, actually helpful ways. Barbells don't have genders. They have weights, she explains. Ditto goes for plates, kettlebells, and dumbbells. People of any gender can use any weight barbell, so long as they have the requisite strength to move it well and safely, she says. Okay, this sounds extremely reasonable, especially to me, a person who doesn't do CrossFit. In my gym, which is a lifting gym and a boxing gym, if someone told me to go grab the woman's barbell, I'd be like, which woman's barbell? Doesn't the gym own all their barbells? I didn't know that any particular man or woman owned any particular barbell. We just all call the barbells, the dumbbells, the plates, the weights by their weight, because that's what makes the most sense when you're communicating to somebody about a weight. Comments on the Morning Chalk Up Instagram didn't see the issue the same way, though. Here are some of the comments that the post received on Instagram. Has anybody just told the woman's bar to identify as a men's bar? Can we make the assault bike women's only? Asking for me, to which the Morning Chalk Up CrossFit page just left a laughing emoji. I appreciate when sport equipment is designed for a female's unique physiological and anatomical needs. I'm so bored with the word gender. All right, Sally, let's have you grab one of those birthing person's bars, and Greg will put you on the bar for people with penises. Clown emoji. Yeah, it's a no for me. Keep women in women's sports, aka women's bar, nothing less, fam. I mean, I use the men's bar because I run out of room deadlifting, but like, it's the men's barbell. I stand by God's creation and design. God designed barbells. God designed some barbells to have penises. I am a woman who generally prefers to use the men's bar. I refer to them as the men's and women's bar or the dude and chick bar. To all of my clients, including the 3 lesbians I train, I think of my butch lesbian clients as dudes. My kid is a butch lesbian who presents like a dude, and even she calls it the ladies' bar. Doesn't mean I'm calling her a chick if she uses it. Please stop. This bullshit about not gendering the bar is the last stop before you start eliminating men's and women's division and make the women compete against the men. This one just says woke. Is this the same activist Alyssa Royce who had all her members show proof of vaccine before entering her gym? That's not showing inclusivity in the least. And don't forget to get your 6th booster and wear your mask before lifting your gender-neutral bars. Okay, wait, how did this even become a discussion about wokeness or vaccines or lesbians or trans people? What is happening? In addition, Rocket Community Fitness in Seattle, the CrossFit gym owned by Alyssa Royce, suddenly received a barrage of negative reviews from people who never even visited the gym, plus nasty emails just talking shit about the LGBTQ community. 1 star. These people aren't actually serious about getting stronger, healthier, swole, or nothing. It's just a bunch of yuppies with too much time on their hands that don't actually know how to get stronger. They just want to play with little kid weights all day.
Madness. It made no sense at all.
1 star. Go woke, go broke, keep the stuff out of gyms. Then they received an email that said, got any of those gay dumbbells? Here's another email that I'm gonna have to censor some of these words. Alyssa, you are a dumbass, loud-mouthed, woke C-word who supports F-words and cross-dressing queers. Fuck you and your trans F-words, you confused liberal-ass clowns. I'm sorry, but why is it that people who hate the LGBTQ community think we're at fault for everything? Calling a barbell by its weight is not the gay agenda taking over. It's what most non-CrossFit gyms were already doing by default. It's just easier for most people to understand. None of this made any sense at all to me, so I decided to speak to my friend, registered dietitian Kat Benson, who has been a member of CrossFit for a long time and has found joy in their workouts.
This kind of starts, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of background. You mentioned Alyssa Royce. So she used to own a CrossFit affiliate, Rocket CrossFit. It is now moved or is now changed its name to Rocket CrossFit Fitness. And there's a lot of backstory, so stay with me on this. So several years ago, she had discussed some of the issues regarding transgender inclusion, like in the open. So the open in CrossFit is a time, it's now it's like 3 weeks, but it used to be 5 weeks, I believe. And it was just a several week long challenge almost where everyone would do the exact same workout like in that week one time whenever they would want to do that, and then everybody uploads their scores, and then from there that leads to different steps ultimately towards the games, right? And so there were some issues regarding transgender inclusion into the competition, and so since then they do allow transgender athletes into the open, and they have like their rule book that explains kind of just their policy around that. So Alyssa Royce was really the person to get that going though. And so she already had, with that, she had a relationship with CrossFit headquarters, and especially the CEO, or especially the like Greg Glassman, who was just like running the whole thing. People started to know her name a lot with that transgender kind of policy change and all of that. Really the goal of what she was trying to say was focused on the inclusivity part, preventing injuries, catering to individual capabilities rather than someone's gender for choosing which barbell that they were going to work out with. So in the International Weightlifting Federation, the men's bar weighs 20 kilograms and the women's bar weighs 15 kilograms. So it's kind of like based off that.
So she was basically like, let's just call the barbells by the weight that they are.
Because it was posted by like what is considered like a CrossFit news, it's not official news, but anytime there's something that newsworthy that breaks within the CrossFit realm, it's coming from the Morning Chalk Up. And so they covered this, and they're really big on Instagram. Their comment section for this specific story was just self-care was not reading the comments. Like they were just very, very going in on Alyssa and just focusing on the inclusivity side of things, not really even considering the fact that somebody could have like injured themselves, or like it's not focused on individual capabilities. if you are assigning those bars to that person, like at a higher competition, at an Olympic lifting meet, like the policies within there, like the athletes are familiar with, like they are training for that. But, you know, someone just going into a gym, it's really important to look at that individual's capabilities rather than looking at their gender and then assigning a specific, you know, weight up front. I think the fact that it was coming from Alyssa Royce with her history with CrossFit, I think that also played a role in the backlash. Online and in real life, I've had very different experiences.
Yeah, same.
So like in my experiences, online CrossFit culture is a lot different from real life CrossFit culture. And I think that a lot of that division is done intentionally for followers, for clout, for in a way that helps that person to gain their, like, get their name out more so than how it would work in person. There has been movement towards inclusivity, particularly after Greg Glassman's resignation, after he stepped down. But I think alongside of that, the rise of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who a lot of people associate with CrossFit, especially who don't have any kind of history with CrossFit, they hear CrossFit and they might think of her. I think that a lot of people have seen her use CrossFit as like a formula. I think a lot of conservative influencers are seeing other people who they want to be like and doing similar things. And I do want to also say that in 2021, so there's a spokesperson for CrossFit, Andrew Weinstein, and he said that CrossFit supports respectful, fact-based political dialogue to address common challenges, and we strongly oppose the loathsome and dangerous lies attributed to Miss Green. So they have like given some statements regarding that and are really trying to, in my opinion, kind of distance themselves. When CrossFit was founded, though, it gained a lot of early traction with law enforcement, with military members, with firefighters, people who had like physical demands of their jobs. And they found that doing something like CrossFit was helping them with their job.
I then also talked with fitness YouTuber Obese to Beast about the strange political divides in fitness as well. As a man in the fitness space, he's often had to deal with inaccurate assumptions about what his views are, as well as conflicts regarding being a more progressive guy in the gym. You're a more progressive kind of guy. You know, I think I've seen your videos in the past that you've talked about like being an LGBTQ ally and things like that, and like caring about that side of things. And, you know, we sometimes see this stereotype that gym bros are like these like alpha males or like these like red pill guys or these alt-right type of dudes. And I know that you've mentioned that like sometimes people will assume that you're that kind of guy before getting to know you. And so I'm wondering, you know, how have those assumptions kind of impacted you, and have like, I know you've shared some of your political views and things like that on your channel. How has that impacted like people's impressions of you? Has it caused you any issues online, anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, just people have assumptions, right? Like you kind of brought up, and they just assume that I'm going to be a certain way based on maybe like the content that I make or the things that I talk about. And they assume I'm going to be a certain way. And when it comes out or whatever, like whatever, if it's like me just talking in a video, or if I make because I ended up like a few years ago, made a whole video kind of talking about my switch, because there was a good portion of my life when I would not consider myself progressive or left-leaning by any stretch, right? I was definitely more right-wing, I guess. I wasn't it's not something I thought about much. I was just I was brought up in a very Christian household, and those views, I think everyone kind of understands where you go from there, right?
Yeah.
And so then things just happened. I think one thing that was really big for me, and so I guess you could say it's more recent, but like 2020 was a big year for me in learning about a lot of stuff, and it taught me a lot about myself. And so, there's definitely, it's not even like, I wouldn't even say it's just like this, it's like this archetype that people talk about. Like, I would say that it's generally true. The chances of you going to a gym and talking to a dude and they end up being like a gym bro right wing are pretty high, you know?
Yeah.
It's so common. And I think like, I do try and like think about like, what is it that seems to be the reason for it? And I do think that a lot of it is like the, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Don't think about the issues that you've had, just work through it, which again, like I even alluded to earlier, like I can see valid things in that. but also I can see not valid things in that and things that where it can be really damaging, right? And then it goes to the other side of the spectrum too. Like that's why I really struggle with like a lot of my videos. I try and be a voice of reason, but on the internet, you know how it is. Like you are either completely on one side, completely on another side, and if you are not, like, people get mad at you, and that's what I've dealt with. I try my best to see and understand where people are coming from. But it's just hard, it's hard on the internet.
You always have come across to me as a very reasonable person. It's one reason that I enjoy watching your channel. I think that you seem to have a very balanced take on things. You seem to try to understand where people are coming from and not bully people, but rather like try to understand different sides of the issue. And I know that you've been very supportive of like trans people and just LGBTQ people in general online. Have you dealt with any like controversies for just like being in favor of, LGBT community and things like that?
It's not something I've talked about much, but there was a group of people that I was friends with that ended up not being super great with that community. And I kind of spoke out against it. And then those people spoke out against me. And if you looked at like the general consensus was I lost. So I did not.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I did not. I did not come out good in that encounter by any means. I think if people that know what I'm talking about, they'll probably agree. It just did not go my way again, because I think a big part of it is, part of it is I didn't handle things super well. I think I was very emotional and I was trying to, what I felt, do what was right. And I think I take full responsibility. I didn't do everything right, but just in general, like the consensus was that I'm being ridiculous. You're wrong. Like, how could you think this kind of stuff? So it's definitely kind of bit me in the butt. But the way that I guess helps me sleep at night is that I did what I thought was right. And I tried to stand up for people who I felt deserve, or not, they need me, right? But like, I felt that we're not getting represented correctly, and I had a platform to try at least, right? And I tried. I'm not sure how well I did, but all I can do is hope that I help some people. And I have had some people message me since then and say that they appreciate it, which makes me feel good, I guess. But like all in all, it definitely did not like go well for me, but it is what it is. That's life.
So yes, as it seems, far-right beliefs are becoming more and more commonplace in fitness spaces. I think part of the connection between the alt-right and gym bro culture could come from a reliance on something that is sometimes called bro science. Bro science isn't really science. It's things like buy my supplements to maximize your gains, or take steroids to maximize your gains, or the only person in the gym who matters is you, so taking a vaccine isn't necessary as long as you're maximizing your gains. The shift toward gym bro pseudoscience was only amplified throughout 2021 and 2022 when Joe Rogan, arguably one of the most popular gym bro influencers of all time, started promoting anti-vax conspiracy theories on The Joe Rogan Experience, his podcast with millions of listeners, and began inviting tons of anti-vax doctors without really bringing the pro-vaccine experts to balance it out and give their takes on the situation as well. And this actually went over pretty well with his audience. While, yes, he did lose a portion of his viewers, he also maintained a strong audience of fellow gym bros just like him who saw nothing wrong with not getting vaccinated. In 2022, The Guardian released an article called Joe Rogan's COVID Claims: What Does the Science Actually Say? In that article, science correspondent Linda Geddes writes, Rogan has claimed he isn't anti-vaccine, but during a 23rd of April 2021 episode of his podcast, he said, if you're like 21 years old and you say to me, should I get vaccinated? I'll go, no. Although it's true that older people are at greater risk of severe disease and death, younger people can and do die from COVID-19. According to the latest UK Health Security Agency figures, there have been 39 deaths in 20 to 29-year-olds with laboratory-confirmed COVID in England since January 2021. During his 18th of June 2021 podcast, Rogan's guest, the evolutionary biologist Brett Weinstein, claimed that ivermectin alone, if properly utilized, is capable of driving this pathogen to extinction. On the 2nd of September, Rogan announced that he had tested positive for COVID-19 and was also taking the anti-parasitic drug. Although he recovered, ivermectin is unlikely to explain why. According to a recent Cochrane review, which analyzed data from multiple studies, there is no evidence to support the use of ivermectin either for preventing or treating COVID. In his 20th of August 2021 podcast, Rogan claimed the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines were not really vaccines, but gene therapy. A vaccine is where they take a dead virus and they turn it into a vaccine and they inject it into your body so that your body fights off the infection, he said. This is really gene therapy. It's a different thing. It's tricking your body into producing spike protein and making these antibodies for COVID. It's true that mRNA vaccines persuade our own cells to manufacture the viral spike protein, which in turn prompts the production of antibodies. However, whereas gene therapy is designed to permanently alter an individual's genes, mRNA vaccines issue instructions to protein-making machinery located in the cytoplasm, which degrade after about 72 hours. Because immune cells are able to remember pieces of virus they've encountered, this temporary encounter still has a lasting effect, but it doesn't alter our genome. Other types of vaccines, such as the influenza or hepatitis B vaccine, also expose the immune system to viral proteins, albeit pre-assembled ones. So at first this whole thing seemed really weird to me. How can someone who loves building muscle, who loves working out, someone so in tune with his own body, deny important science of the impacts of a dangerous virus on our bodies and deny the science of the protections that a vaccine can give? But when framed in the realm of individualism within gym culture, it starts to make sense. Gym culture, as much as I love it, does emphasize the ego and the self. It does create a sense, especially among men, of invincibility. It tells you that you're responsible for your gains. You're responsible for coming into the gym every day. You are solely responsible for your results. So when a worldwide pandemic swoops on in and shows us that we all had a lot less control over our own lives than we originally thought, and that we all need to do our part, like taking a vaccine to help stop the spread of an illness that could be deadly to many people, that can be tough for a lot of this gym bro crowd to swallow. While the specific example of COVID vaccines is fairly recent, the phenomenon of gym bro pseudoscience has been around for a while, and does, in some cases, have strange connections with conservative and alt-right spheres. Let's look at one of the most extreme right-wing influencers of all time, the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
So I never expected Trump charging into a goblin's nest to not get some goblin vomit and slop and blood on him. I don't want to see him kissing goblins, having political succubus with goblins. I don't want to see him ingratiating goblins.
In each episode of Alex Jones's show, InfoWars, he not only takes you through a series of weird conspiracy theories and rants about the downfall of society, he also makes sure to include enough ad breaks to sell you on his dietary supplements. In 2017, BuzzFeed News published an article called "We Sent Alex Jones's InfoWars Supplements to a Lab. Here's What's in Them." As the article reports, the independent test results are the work of Labdoor, a San Francisco-based lab that tests and grades dietary supplements. Labdoor ran full tests on 6 popular InfoWars supplements to determine the exact makeup of each supplement and screen for various dangerous and illegal chemicals. It also investigated a few of the products that claimed incredible benefits for what seemed like could just be simple ingredients. Survival Shield X2, for example, is just plain old iodine, the same stuff that doctors used to pour on surfaces as a disinfectant, Labdoor's results read. When the company tested Anthroplex, which retails for $29.95, it found that there was so little zinc that if you're extremely zinc deficient, the value is not going to be significantly helpful. The report notes that you could actually get another zinc orotate supplement for around $5 with an impactful serving size, before concluding simply that this product is a waste of money. This claim that the InfoWars supplements often contained less effective serving sizes than their less expensive counterparts was a running theme in Labdoor's results. In almost every example, Labdoor's tests and reviews describe the products as little more than heavily overpriced supplements with few health benefits, if any. Like a true lover of capitalism, Alex Jones isn't here to make you healthy, he's here to make money off of you. So we know that weird alt-right gym bro logic isn't exactly healthy, to say the least, even if some guys in that sphere do have nice gains. But now, let's take a look at what's happening in the other side, in far leftist feminist circles, the places where I often tend to find myself. In this section, while I am going to largely agree with the majority of leftist talking points, there are going to be some that I strongly disagree with as well. Let's break it down. We need to talk about the extremely complicated topic of fat acceptance within the feminist movement. In 2019, a fat activist influencer named Sonali Rachatoire, also known as the Fat Sex Therapist, gave a talk at St. Olaf's College in which they said the following.
You cannot, after leaving this room, continue to call yourself progressive or leftist or radical or a Marxist or a communist or a socialist or an anarchist and still hold on to fatphobic values. Because fatphobia is tied into ableism, fatphobia is tied into classism, fatphobia is tied into capitalism, into this understanding that a system is telling us that there is an inherent rank and hierarchy of body worthiness. And we cannot continue to hold on to fat phobia and continue to call ourselves radical in any means. It is not radical to be fat phobic.
In 2019, Sonali spoke at St. Olaf College, but in this talk, they made some extremely outlandish claims. The first of which is they said, "I truly believe that a child cannot consent to being on a diet the same way a child cannot consent to having sex." And then they go on to say, "I experience diet culture as a form of assault because it impacts the way that I experience my body. We should be critical of the use of science and production of knowledge to continue promoting this idea that certain bodies are fit, able, and desirable. Is it my fatness that causes my high blood pressure, or is it my experience of weight stigma?" They then connected the science suggesting that obesity is unhealthy to Nazism, saying that, quote, "fat-phobic science is, quote, often actually eugenic science, and eugenic science is Nazi science." And if all of this was not absurd enough, then this next part should really push you over the edge. So this all took place, like I said, in 2019, and this was after the mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, where a mosque was the target. Sonali went on to say, "I do not think it's surprising that the man who shot up Christchurch, New Zealand was also a fitness instructor." Rashator said, after making this claim, they added that the shooting is a clear communication that there's still an idealized body. Nazis really love this idea of an idealized body, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that a fitness instructor might also think about an idealized body in this thin white supremacist way.
We're definitely going to need to unpack that. Tying being a fitness instructor to being a Nazi, that's, yeah, we're going to unpack that. In the past few years, I've been hearing more and more that movements related to fat acceptance, body positivity, body neutrality, weight neutrality, fat liberation, that those are all key pieces of the feminist movement, and to the movement for racial equality and socioeconomic equality, that you can't be a real feminist if you're not on board with the movement for fat activism and every single part of that movement. So I wondered, is this true? Well, in order to determine that, I first had to look into what fat acceptance actually was. And after studying this movement for the past few months, the research of which I will present to you in a moment, I have determined two things. First, that in a lot of places, the fat acceptance movement is very, very necessary, especially for intersections related to prejudice regarding race, sex, and class. Meaning that, yes, a lot of pieces do intertwine with feminism, and you'll see what I mean when I break that down. But I learned a second thing, and that is that this movement is also very, very wrong about a lot of pieces, and that some of those pieces can become very anti-feminist, borderline reactionary when applied in practice. So let's back up a little bit. What is the fat acceptance movement? What is body positivity? What is the ideology of health at every size? You mentioned earlier that you like to take a weight neutral approach to your work as a dietitian. So from your perspective, what does that mean? Why is that important to do? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that comes from understanding yo-yo dieting, weight cycling. So a lot of times what happens is people go on diets and they'll lose some weight, and then they'll find that they gain that weight back plus more. And with research, with evidence, we know that weight cycling can put stress on the body. Each cycle of weight cycling, it can lead to that increased body fat percentage. It can lead to muscle loss and can have an impact on blood pressure, cholesterol levels, their risks for other like metabolic related diseases or conditions. And so my goal is really to help people not fall into a kind of weight cycling, yo-yo cycling approach. And what we know is often the start of weight cycling and yo-yo dieting is these kind of diets that really have an emphasis on weight loss rather than approaches that are just supportive of physical health and not talking about the weight necessarily.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a good way to go about it. And I know that you've talked in the past as well about the concept of health at every size. What are your thoughts on the concept of health at every size, the book it's based on, like all of that?
Yeah. So a lot of things to unpack there. Yeah. So I'm glad that you said health at every size, because a lot of times people hear HAES and they think of healthy at every size. And that was not the intention of it. It was more about recognizing that there are so many different factors that influence overall health and wellness. Things like the social determinants of health. There are genetic predispositions. There are individual behaviors that certainly can play a role, but the overall social determinants, of health impacts so much more than a person's weight. And so really that kind of movement, the health at every size, is more about bringing awareness to those other impacts or those other things that can impact health, and also providing like care for those people instead of just saying eat less and move more, right? Because that's not beneficial.
That's not universally true either. Like if you eat less in general, but you're not getting enough nutrients, that's not healthy. That it might decrease your body size if you're doing it in a certain way, but like it's not going to be healthy if you're deficient in nutrients and things like that. Or like moving more can be good, but if you're moving in a way that injures you, that's not healthy. So there's like you said, this is very complicated. To make it into something that's oversimplified is just, I think, is doing a disservice to everyone.
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, kind of relating to this, is we've talked in the past about the book Fearing the Black Body and how that book has kind of laid the groundwork in some ways for how people have tied weight discrimination to racism. I've actually been listening to the audiobook of it while I've been at the gym, so I'm not done with it yet, but I do think the concepts in it and the research in it is interesting. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that book and like what you learned from it, or if you incorporate any of that into your approach at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fearing the Black Body, I have my copy right here, tons of different notes, and I've referred to it quite a bit. I think it just does a really great job of going through the history as much as we know, and how it has impacted people's views on body types and body sizes and what is desirable. And it's really interesting to see that change throughout centuries. And as far as like application goes, I have referred that book to different people who I'm working with if they are trying to kind of disentangle themselves from a specific kind of weight focused approach. My focus is on if we can include actions that are supportive of physical health, and kind of taking a step back, we have to look at the definition of health and realize that the definition of health includes not just physical health, but mental, social, emotional well-being, so many different aspects of well-being that aren't just physical. And a lot of times what we find is that it's specifically like weight-focused actions can impact those other sides of health, maybe in kind of a more negative way. That's what we see a lot with toxic dieting behaviors, that they impact either mental health or emotional well-being. And so the inclusion of actions that support physical health that also don't harm those other aspects of health, I think sometimes they can overlap, and that's where we might see this unnecessary like divide.
Well, it's like you were telling me back when you were my dietitian, when I was in surgery recovery, you would tell me about how when you measure your weight, that's a data point, but it's not the only data point, but it is a data point. So like whether your weight is going up or down a lot in what period of time, that's something to take note of. It's not the be all end all, because like I recently gained 10 pounds, but like my waist measurement is identical. My clothes are even looser than before. So I'm figuring, oh, hey, I must be finally putting on some muscle because I've been at the gym every single day. And so in my mind, it's like, okay, that's a measurement of that, but I wouldn't be able to determine that I was doing muscle growth had I not also noticed that my strength was getting better. You need to kind of take a whole variety of factors into consideration, and to look at weight as the only one, I don't think necessarily makes sense, but to completely ignore it, I don't think makes sense either.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a neutral data point. So going back to that question of like weight neutral dietitian, like it's just, it would be like me saying like I am any other of those aspects dietitian. Like no, like it's just a neutral data point. We need more information and more nuance. So one of the things also, just kind of talking about health at every size specifically. So health at every size, that also has principles, and those might be changing within the next year or so, just updating with the leadership over at the Association for Size Diversity and Health. But as of currently right now, we're already in 2024, their principles still include health enhancement. And specifically on their website, they talk about health enhancement. So supporting health policies that improve and equalize access to information and services, and personal practices that improve human well-being, including attention to individual physical, economical, social, spiritual, emotional, and other needs. And there's also the inclusion of life-enhancing movement, so supporting physical activities that allow people of all sizes, abilities, and interests to engage in enjoyable movement to the degree that they choose. And then one more that I wanted to mention was the eating for well-being as one of their principles. It says, eating for well-being, promote flexible, individualized eating based on hunger, satiety, nutrition needs, and pleasure, rather than any externally regulated eating plan focused on weight control. And so kind of going back to what we were talking about, I think sometimes people can hear health at every size and hear that and think that that means we're going to not do anything, any kind of focus on health, when in reality, at least at this time, the health at every size principles is very much in alignment with doing things that are supportive of physical health, not just supportive of current physical health, but improvements in physical health.
And I mean, I think when it's framed that way, regardless of size, everyone deserves equal access to healthcare. Everyone deserves the ability to pursue health and to have equal access to, foods that have the nutrients their bodies need. Like, yeah, I think you'd have to be a huge asshole not to agree with that. Like,
Right. And that's
true.
why I think there is a divide. And that's why sometimes people who are in support of health at every size principles don't really understand why people just kind of crap on that idea, because it is very much in alignment with health supportive, just body kindness.
The first important thing that the body positivity and fat activism movements have brought to light is the ways that the diet industry has manipulated all of us for profit in service of an overall capitalist system. Let's be clear about one thing. The diet industry is not there to make people fitter or more athletic or healthier in any way. The diet industry is there for one reason and one reason alone: to make a profit. According to an article on My Sports Science entitled "From Fad Diets to Fat Burners: How Pseudoscience is Harming Your Practice," misinformation is everywhere. It affects how we think, how we behave, and the decisions we make. Nowhere is this truer than in the global health and fitness industry. Worth over $4 trillion, the industry has expanded rapidly, far outstripping the capacity of government agencies to regulate the market. Consequently, we are inundated with commercial products and services claiming to improve health performance and facilitate recovery. Some are based on science, most are not. In fact, many are sold on baseless or exaggerated claims and feigned scientific legitimacy, pseudoscience. Consider the commercial weight loss industry, which has estimated annual revenues exceeding $150 billion in the US and Europe. The industry hinges on the sale of ineffective fad diets and weight loss supplements. Rather than evoking long-term weight loss, such interventions result in chronic weight loss and regain, a phenomenon called yo-yo dieting that increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, life dissatisfaction, and psychopathology, like binge eating, food restriction, anxiety, depression, and sleep disruption. Makes sense that an industry that profits from selling you diets and workout plans would want you to continue needing them and continue relying on them. It's the exact same issue that we have with the self-help industry on this channel when we review bad self-help books. Self-help books often highlight insecurities that we didn't even know we had, creating new insecurities and new problems about ourselves that now need to be solved, because otherwise, if we're too confident in ourselves, if we're too happy with our lives, why would we ever need to buy the next self-help book? Why would we pay thousands of dollars to go to this influencer seminar? Why would we pay tens of thousands of dollars for personal life coaching? The same logic applies here. The diet industry does not care about your health. If they did, they would not be selling you diets. Diets create an unhealthy cycle of weight loss and weight gain, which can have lifelong impacts on your mental health, not to mention your cardiovascular health. And this makes a lot of sense when you look at multi-level marketing companies or MLMs. So many MLMs like Beachbody, Juice Plus, It Works, and more all rely on the idea that you should lose weight quickly, and that their challenge or their diet plan will be the one to help you do it. That's why we've got scammy fitness influencers like Autumn Calabrese, whose book I reviewed on this channel, promoting things like the 21-day fix or a weirdly restrictive crash diet where you have to color code all your food in a million different Tupperware containers. Weirdly enough, Tupperware is also an MLM, and then somehow you're supposed to just continue that system for the rest of your life? Probably the most key component to right-wing philosophy, at least in the US in the 21st century, is the emphasis on the unregulated market. There's a reason that most creators in the anti-MLM community are more left-leaning. We're calling for the FTC to regulate these shady, scammy companies, and a lot of free market absolutism relies on the assumption that government regulation is always bad, the market will sort itself out, and that if a company is scammy enough, people will just eventually stop falling for it on their own free will. It's all about the invisible hand of Adam Smith Sr., all while Adam Smith Jr. goes on the Mind Pump podcast to pretend he's not been a red pillar all along. And in a lot of ways, diet culture itself is linked to, once again, beliefs often held by staunch conservatives. In the US specifically, the right wing has a strong overlap with evangelical communities, fundamentalist communities, and most forms of Protestant Christianity. And this is where we get purity culture. Purity culture, often popular in religious and especially in Christian communities, places value on a person's purity, usually in regards to things like not having sex before marriage. But purity culture also contributes to a culture of dieting, the entire idea being denying yourself pleasure is virtuous, sacrifice is inherently noble, whether or not the actions you take have any positive impacts on society or even on any other people is irrelevant. If you can prove that you've had the least sexual contact, gotten the least sleep, taken the fewest breaks while working, or eaten the smallest amount of food, you have proven yourself virtuous. In her book, Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fatphobia, Dr. Sabrina Strings discusses how historically the rise of white Protestant Christian communities in Europe also led to a growing bias against fat people and a growing interest in diet culture. In the case of this book, Dr. Strings argues that these white Christians were placing a moral value judgment on someone's weight, size, eating habits, and more, often in an attempt to separate themselves from black people, many of whom were enslaved at the time. She writes, "The legacy of Protestant moralism and race science as it related to fat and thin persons loomed large. Indeed, many early to mid-20th century physicians relied on moral and racial logics to rail against persons deemed too fat or too thin. But over time, a growing number did so specifically and exclusively to condemn fatness." Whether or not you specifically are a religious person, I think a lot of us can still see the effects of this line of thinking. The idea that sacrifice in itself makes us better people, that it's impressive to deny ourselves the things we want for as long as possible just to prove that we can. It's also the underlying idea of hustle culture. If you worked more hours than everyone else and you slept the least, people will for some reason be impressed with you, which once again ties back to capitalism, because of course everyone wants to promote the idea that more labor is valuable, etc. On and on, I think we can see the connection. So yes, the diet industry and even diet culture itself is all part of a system that benefits big corporations and the wealthy, an industry emphasizing some of the worst pieces of the capitalist system. There's also another claim I want to now delve into that the body positivity movement is 1000% right about, and it's an extremely important claim, and that's that BMI, or body mass index, is absolute bullshit, and that relying on it as a health metric is often inaccurate and dangerous. Here, let me show you a little experiment. We're using the BMI calculator on the website for the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, okay? So I'm about 5'6" now. In high school, I was 5'5.5". I think my spine straightened out a little bit with physical therapy and stuff. So let's say I'm 5 feet, 5.5. So this is me at 16, 17 years old. My lowest weight was around 112 pounds. So let's compute the BMI for that. 18.4. So, oh wow, I'm just like a tenth of a pound under, a tenth of a BMI percentage underweight. Wow, that's not so bad, right? That's just like very mildly underweight. You wouldn't be diagnosed with severe anorexia for that. Only Savvy has 2 big curves in her spine, right? So Savvy at the time was 5'5.5" tall, but the shortest distance between 2 points is a line, right? So if that's assuming that you have a spine that is a straight line. If you have a spine that is curved, then that means your body is actually taking up more space in height than the height that shows up because you can't stand up perfectly straight due to your back, right? I would actually, had I not had scoliosis, roughly, which, you know, you can't tell what would have happened in an alternate universe, but roughly people who get spinal fusion surgery end up gaining about 2 to 3 inches of height, and that's still not to make your spine perfectly straight. And I had 2 curves. Neither of them were bad enough on their own to need spinal fusion, so this is all estimated, right? But let's assume, theoretically, for the sake of the argument, that I would have been about 5'8" had I not had scoliosis, which is about accurate based on a lot of other factors that I've taken into consideration, okay? Let's say I'm 5'8" and 112 pounds. Let's compute my BMI now. 17.0, which now classifies for anorexia diagnosis. See, look at that. That's just an example right there of why it's bullshit to use BMI as a way to get anorexia diagnosis. Now let's do a new BMI experiment. So now I am 31 years old and I am 5'6". My weight this morning, to be fair, I'm extremely bloated from having my period right now when I weighed myself this morning, which BMI also doesn't take into account. So we're going to use the weight I got this morning, which was 161 pounds. Normally I'm around 155 or so, but we're going to say 161. So this is me as an adult who works out 5 times a week, lifts heavy weights, and is training for powerlifting competitions. So I have gained a significant amount of muscle in the past couple years. Oh my God, what is that? I'm overweight now. I have a BMI of 26. I'm overweight. What happened? Now let's take a look at my weight when I'm not bloated from my period. Oh wow, I'm just barely overweight. If I lost like 1 pound, I wouldn't be overweight anymore. That's amazing. Oh, look, what if I cured my scoliosis? What if I didn't have scoliosis anymore? Oh my God, now I'm in the normal weight range. This is just an example of how BMI absolutely doesn't work, because there's so many factors for my body specifically that aren't being taken into account when you just do height and weight. Remember, humans are 3-dimensional. And this is a problem, especially when BMI is still used as a criterion for the diagnosis of anorexia. Take someone like me who at 17 years old didn't eat enough food, had ribs jutting out of my skin, had my hip bones poking out, had my lips turning purple, my body constantly going numb and shivering even in 80-degree summer heat. But because I was 2 inches shorter than my proportions would indicate due to my spine not going in a straight line, that means I'm technically just like a little tiny bit underweight, borderline healthy range, rather than holy shit, you're in extreme crisis. And so that's my specific case, but I'm thinking like bodies are 3-dimensional and there's so many other factors that go into like fat distribution, muscle distribution, how, you know, how far apart your bones are set, just all this other different stuff. And I wonder too, like people talk about the BMI chart being, you know, it measured trends among white men in Europe in like hundreds of years ago, and it's still being used today. It might be outdated as a result of that. And that could kind of tie into the whole like, you know, it doesn't apply really at all to non-white people or to women or anything like that. And so with all of that in mind, I'm kind of wondering, like, what are your thoughts on how the BMI chart is used? Do you think that it's a useful tool, or like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
So I think BMI is useful sometimes, but I feel like for the average person like you and me, not really. Like you're absolutely correct. You already said everything I was going to say. BMI, all it is a measurement, is a ratio of your height to your weight. And that's it. It doesn't measure your fat-free mass. It doesn't measure like your bones. It doesn't know how much waste is in your colon, the food that's in your stomach, how much water is in your muscles right now, or is throughout your body right now. It's just a ratio of height and weight. And that can be very, very deceiving for a lot of people, especially like people like you and me who lift weights. And like my husband, for example, he's below average height. He's a short guy. He's 5'4". He's barely taller than me. Yeah, me and Ace are hobbits. So he's barely
I'm taller than both of you.
Yeah.
And my trainer at the gym was calling me small. What is she on about? And she's the smallest of all of us.
Yeah. So my husband Ace is short, but he's heavy. He does jujitsu and MMA training.
Yeah.
He weight trains. He's in the military, so he's very physically active. So he's short, but my husband has a very muscular build. We joke and we say that he has like, if he were a dog, he'd probably be like an XXL bully or like a pocket bully or something like that, because he's small in stature, but he's like big.
That's adorable.
And according to BMI, he is like morbidly obese, I think. But all it takes is looking at him, and he's not morbidly obese, because also one of the definition of obesity is excess adiposity, fat. And my husband doesn't have that. And that's what BMI does not take into account. So I don't think that BMI is completely useless all the time. I think it depends on the setting. I'm currently I've been at it for a while. I take breaks. But I'm currently on a weight loss endeavor. I'm losing body fat. I'm not looking at my BMI because I'm just an average healthy human. There's no reason for me to look at BMI because I'm not overweight. I'm not excessively overweight. And I'm just a person who's pursuing what I would call at-home weight loss. Now, I think it's different if you're, for example, like maybe you're a bariatric surgeon and you have a patient that is very, very obese. And if you're using it as a metric to kind of track their progress and see where they're at, then I think it is more of a useful value. But that's an example of, again, you have to just look at people. And like, you can look at someone and tell that if somebody is 500, 600, 700 pounds, they clearly have excess adiposity. And if their BMI puts them in the extreme obesity category, then you can look at them and know why. But that's specific to the clinical setting. So I do not think everybody needs to look at BMI. And it's for the reasons that you said. It doesn't measure everything. I think it's just like one of those things. It's one of those metrics that's been on like medical charting systems for so long that somebody's just like, nah, it's been on there for like 70 years. Why take it off at this point?
Right.
But I do agree with you that in terms of actual health, body composition matters more than your BMI. And like, we should take more time to actually look at someone's actual level of adiposity to their fat-free mass. That would make more sense.
But Savvy, you might be saying, BMI doesn't work for you. Okay, maybe it doesn't work for high-level athletes or people with twisted spines or people who are both, but it works for the majority of the population, right? Well, I really don't think it does, because it was never intended to. Way back in 2009, now 15 years ago, NPR released an article called Top 10 Reasons Why the BMI is Bogus. It included points like, the person who dreamed up the BMI said explicitly that it could not and should not be used to indicate the level of fatness in an individual. The BMI was introduced in the early 19th century by a Belgian named Lambert Adolphe Jacques Quetelet. He was a mathematician, not a physician. He produced the formula to give a quick and easy way to measure the degree of obesity in the general population to assist the government in allocating resources. In other words, it is a 200-year-old hack. It is scientifically nonsensical. There is no physiological reason to square a person's height. He squared the height to get a formula that matched the overall data. If you can't fix the data, rig the formula. Moreover, it ignores waist size, which is a clear indicator of obesity level. It is physiologically wrong. It makes no allowance for the relative proportions of bone, muscle, and fat in the body, but bone is denser than muscle and twice as dense as fat, so if a person with strong bones, good muscle tone, and low fat will have a high BMI. Basically, BMI was first determined with a sample size of exclusively white European men. It did not take women or any racial or ethnic groups outside of Europe into account at all. It aimed to study overall population trends over time, not the health of an individual person. People are three-dimensional. In what universe does it make sense to take only someone's height and their weight, but not their shoulder distance, hip distance, waist circumference, bone density, head size, etc., all of that into account as well? The truth is, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this. Back in 2022, I attempted a fitness challenge known as the 75 Hard, which was created by Andy Frisella, a gym bro who it turns out is also balls deep in the alt-right anti-vaxxer spaces. Yet another example of that. I attempted the challenge as an experiment, knowing full well that I wouldn't be able to complete it due to the fact that I had surgery scheduled halfway through the challenge. But even just trying it for a couple weeks, I quickly noticed that this challenge, which claims it should have the same impact on all participants, does not at all. For example, one piece of the challenge is to drink a gallon of water a day. Not to find the right amount of water for your specific body size and drink that. No, if you are a 4'11", under 100 pounds woman, or if you're a 6'5", 350-pound man, or any other combination thereof, or combination in between, a gallon of water. You all drink 1 gallon of water exactly, as if that's going to make people of wildly different sizes equally hydrated. Another piece of the challenge was to do 2 workouts per day, 1 indoor and 1 outdoor. It was emphasized as a requirement of the challenge. One had to be outdoors with no exceptions. Why? If you start the challenge in January, like a lot of people probably do as a New Year's resolution, it's going to be a very different experience to do an outdoor exercise in Florida, where it might be like 50 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit outside, than it is in the Chicago winter, which last week was -8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's -22 degrees Celsius. Plus there was an additional wind chill. That's how you get frostbite. That's how you get hurt. But the whole point of the 75 Hard Challenge is that it does not allow for modifications or exceptions, because those are just excuses. What it refuses to acknowledge is that the same actions are going to have wildly different outcomes based on circumstances surrounding them. That's what I'm getting at here. Nothing, especially in the world of health, fitness, and nutrition, is going to be one size fits all. And that is where this concept of individual bodily autonomy comes in. I'm not sure why we can't just admit that weight loss is healthy for some people and is not healthy for other people. We all have such a wide variety of factors influencing us that an individualized approach seems necessary. I have my own personal reasons for my body goals. Here's a brief overview of what those are. When I was a little kid, I had a single mom from Polish Chicago. If you know anything about Polish families, particularly Polish moms, they show their love for you by feeding you. My mom still loves to feed everybody, and she's fantastic at it, but being raised part-time by my mom and part-time by my grandma while my mom was working multiple jobs meant that my formative years were spent under the supervision of Midwestern Polish matriarchs. Basically, that means I was given a lot of cheese and a lot of potatoes. I was definitely fat as a kid, but it wasn't just because I was fed so much, it was also because I couldn't couldn't play sports or do physical activity. Another key defining experience of my childhood was dealing with disability. Years before I got my scoliosis diagnosed, back when I was maybe like 3 to 6 years old, I struggled a lot with walking, and I couldn't walk without the aid of devices such as leg braces. I spent a lot of my early childhood in physical therapy, and to say the least, I definitely wasn't the star athlete of my elementary school. To top that all off, I already mentioned being from Polish Chicago, and I think a lot of you know that by nature that just implies Catholic. Catholicism is very big on purity culture, no sex until marriage. Things about like dressing modestly, not drawing men's attention to you, things like that. The messaging you get from a young age, you subconsciously start to see your body as not really your own, especially if you're a girl. After I was diagnosed with scoliosis at age 11, I spent the next 2 years in a back brace, and then the rest of my teen and young adult years all throughout college dealing with on and off severe back pain, going to physical therapy through age 22. All of those things combined left me feeling like my body was never really mine. And that's why, now that I'm an adult, especially throughout my late 20s and early 30s, I'm in the process of reclaiming my body, of making it what I want it to be, not what someone else wants it to be. And that has been extremely important to me. It's why I care that people know that I'm proud to be part of the LGBTQ community. It's why I like to show off my tattoos, why I talk openly about my plastic surgery, and most of all, why I love that I've found a passion for weightlifting. I can take joy in my accomplishments of physical strength. I can show myself that I'm capable of getting stronger. And when it comes to my body's appearance, when it comes to making my own choices, of course also working with licensed trainers and dietitians, doing everything safely, I can choose if I want to lose some fat or gain some muscle. I can make my body what I want it to be because I am an adult woman who feels empowered to make my own choices. To me, that's a feminist way to look at the world, to say everybody should have control over what they do with their own body. And yes, there are many systemic factors that come into play, including financial access to certain activities and medical services, accessibilities for various disabilities, and more. And those are definitely things that we need to talk about. But when I see things about how all intentional weight loss is inherently fatphobic, that makes me sad, because it's not. I can say that my goals for my body are the best for me, and that your goals for your body, whether that's to gain weight, lose weight, love yourself exactly as you are, not think about weight either way and just be completely neutral on it, that is the right choice for you. Human bodies are incredibly complex. There's a reason nutrition science is constantly developing and evolving and presenting new ideas. It's not easy to crack the code of what makes a whole human the way they are. And even the concept of health in itself is multifaceted. An overweight person could easily be healthier than an underweight person. An extremely obese person with no diseases is definitely much healthier than a person in the normal weight range who's battling stage 4 cancer. It's very, very true that you cannot tell someone's overall health just from looking at them alone. But at the same time, it's very reductive to say that weight loss is never beneficial for anyone, because there are some people that it does help. Not everyone, but some people. To delve deeper into this, I talked with both Obese to Beast and Megan Ann about their experiences with weight loss and its impacts on their overall health.
I guess what was the journey for you, like in terms of that and the changes you noticed?
Yeah, so for me, I was the quintessential kid that was always kind of bigger. So I was big basically my whole life. Like I've talked about my life story a lot on my channel, but I grew up very poor, and I actually was taken away from my parents when I was younger. Luckily we got put back with them. But so like my story was very much so like we grew up in poverty. We didn't have much money, and through that, the kinds of foods that we had, the fact that we weren't ever really eating together as a family. I got very good at eating fast, because the faster you ate, the chances of getting seconds were higher. So I still eat very fast. But so I grew up gaining weight basically my entire life. So that was like kind of my identity. And then I started losing weight when I was 20 years old. I was actually watching Netflix, Miami Inc. And this guy came on that had lost a lot of weight. He was getting a tattoo to commemorate that weight loss. And a lot of stuff was going on in my life that really made me open to being like, I want to do this. Like I can do this, And so that was like what I call my click moment. And so from then on, that's when I actually was successful, because I think most people that have been overweight their whole life, or obese, or whatever word you want to use, they've tried to lose weight a lot. Like no one that is that size is surprised that they're overweight, right? And so I had tried to lose weight a ton of times, and I genuinely thought that it was impossible for me. Like I just didn't think that it was like I could do it. Luckily, I was wrong, and it was possible, and I just had to figure some stuff out.
Can you just kind of take me through the trajectory of like where your mindset used to be, how it evolved, where it is now?
Yeah, so when I first came across it was body positivity when I came across it. That's what it was called. It was mainly through Tess Holiday. Like that was like, she was like my gateway drug into into this whole thing. And it was just because like it was cool to see someone who looked like me, like being successful, modeling and stuff like that, because I grew up in the early 2000s and she came on in like the early aughts, and like I hadn't seen that before, and so it was very much, it was just cool for me to see it. And then that was also around the rise of like Instagram and stuff like that, and I was about 15 or 16, I would say, when I saw her for the first time. And she kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different body positivity creators, specifically on Instagram at the time. I liked it for what it is on the outside, which I always say, like, on the outside, it's just about like loving your body no matter what, like that kind of thing. Like, no matter what your body size is, like, you deserve love and respect like everybody else. And I liked that. It was like finally people I could relate to online and in real life to some extent, because I always grew up being like the fat friend. So like I never really had anybody to relate to on that side of things either. I went in for some like routine blood work, and it came back that my liver wasn't functioning correctly.
Oh, no.
And everything was fine, but like my doctor told me that if I kept going down that route, I would probably develop a non-alcoholic fatty liver, which already ran in my family. And so that was really scary. And I was also already pre-diabetic by that point. And so I think that was really when everything shifted for me. And I started really questioning the things that like these creators were starting to post more of, because it kind of shifted away, or I started seeing more of the anti-weight loss. I kind of consumed that for a while, but it wasn't super long before I got that blood work back. And then I decided to change everything, because I was like, my life hasn't even started yet. Like, I hadn't graduated college. Like, I hadn't done any of that. So I started a bariatric program, like not too far after that. So then I got bariatric surgery. I lost over 100 pounds. My highest weight I remember being at was 315 pounds. I can empathize with it as well, like having that experience growing up fat, like, because you do get treated differently. And so it's a very nuanced topic, and I feel like the idea of fat acceptance and anti-fat acceptance in particular like doesn't get approached with the nuance that it deserves, because it does deserve a lot of nuance from both sides of the coin, like people who disagree with it and people who are for it. And so I kind of am like the middle. I remember my physical, like my first physical after I had surgery, when they did all my routine blood work again, and I had completely flipped my insides. Like everything was functioning normally again. And that was my main goal with surgery, was to get that fixed. But as like in terms of losing weight, like that much, absolutely, like a day to day life got so much easier. Like I got shin splints like walking across my campus, my college campus, which was not a big college campus.
People approach diets as like this, like oh, I should try the new temporary like fad diet or the crash diet, which those are so unhealthy. No, you shouldn't. They're scamming you with that. Yeah.
And honestly, like that's how I approached weight loss my entire life. Like that's how, and I just got diagnosed with OCD like in 2023.
Oh, wow.
And I think, and I've had it my whole life. I know that.
Too. Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah.
I think my whole life, I just kind of thought of weight loss as this big, like unattainable thing, and that I had to go like balls to the wall every single time. I think finding that like middle ground and like something that's realistic for you to attain is so important. Again, I made a video called like the weird world of fat activist feminism or something. It was about feminism in the fat acceptance movement. And like the beginning of that video, I talked about why I understood why it felt necessary when it like started, but like, and I mean like in modern times, because it dates back to like the 70s. Like I have a video coming from like the whole history of body positivity and fat acceptance and stuff. But as we know it today in modern times, I understand why it was necessary, because it kind of came out after like the thin is in, like heroin chic kind of time.
Oh, the 90s especially. I know this was like the 70s, but like the 90s were so bad. Like,
oh god, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the 90s. The 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I'm like a soft rock radio DJ over here. Those were the decades that fucked up millennial body image beyond repair. I can definitely see why fat acceptance is considered feminist and empowering, especially when we look at the turn of the century and the ways that women were pressured to be extremely thin. Keep in mind, this was also coming off of a period of very heavy cocaine and heroin use, especially among celebrities. It's really weird to watch a 90s rom-com now and take in just how thin every single person is. It's surreal to watch Seinfeld now in the 2020s and question why we all remember George Costanza as the fat one when he's like not even remotely fat, or to observe the extreme lack of body diversity among the characters, especially the female characters on shows like Seinfeld and Friends. And that's nothing to say for the headlines of that area critiquing many celebrities, many of whom were likely underweight if classified by BMI standards, even though we know BMI is not a reliable metric, but they were still being called fat just for having gained some weight as opposed to just not being as thin as they were the year before. Rewatching 80s, 90s, and 2000s media nowadays is just fucking weird, because I'm not sure a lot of us realize at the time just how hard they were pushing that they wanted us to be extremely thin. And I guess that makes sense considering it was the era of the diet industry really starting to take off as well, especially through selling ads on TV in between those very shows about exclusively very thin people. So that's all to say that, yeah, it does make sense how this became a feminist issue, especially when women's bodies are often the subject of such extreme scrutiny. I do really appreciate about your channel that you are very empathetic and you seem to, like, understand where people are coming from. I really don't like a lot of the like anti-fat acceptance content on the internet.
Me neither.
A lot of people just bully people, but I like that you don't take that route.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things in the fat acceptance movement that are true and that people are saying that are right. Like there's a lot of discrimination that happens. There's a lot of things like you can look at like the BMI chart has a ton of like scientific flaws in it. There's so many things that you can point out and honestly critique, but then when you get to the point where you're policing what women can do with their bodies, that's when I say you've gone too far.
I agree with them that fat people are treated differently in the medical system. 100%. Like 100%. Like as someone who has a chronic illness and was getting diagnosed with that as a 16-year-old fat kid, like I get it, because I was told so many times that just losing weight would make it go away, and that's why I was chronically fatigued. And I was like, this is different than that. Like, and even still I agree that it's not the cause, because I still have it, first of all. I agree with that. And like even just the way fat people are treated in society as a whole, like I get that. Like I was treated much differently at my smallest size than I was at my biggest size. Like when I went into stores, I was more actively sold to after I lost weight than I was when I was bigger. Even if I could fit into stuff in the store that I was in, a lot of people wouldn't come up and actively like talk to me or sell to me. I was overall just approached by more people. And I think it's interesting having been on both sides of that.
Weight bias and weight stigma, I always bring it up because I think it's important. And I think that's my biggest way of navigating it, is making sure to see things from both perspectives, because there's evidence that weight bias and weight stigma are harmful and not helpful. And they're very it's very prevalent in the healthcare system.
What do you think about like people framing it as an issue of like gender and racial equality?
I wish, okay, hold on. I have a lot of thoughts. I need to organize.
It's a complicated issue. It's a big question. I know.
I guess fitness is very individualistic, because like when you have your fitness goals, they are your fitness goals. I mean, like you can work with a coach or a trainer or something, but at the end of the day, it's your body that you're working on. And I guess it is very individualistic. I go to the gym for myself. So and then the other
there's
end
a lot of like but then like the other end, then there's like also a lot of factors like are you in a place where you can take enough time? Like, do you have to work so many hours that you can't fit in any time to go to the gym? Do you have like, there's an issue of like, are you someone who has, you know, kids that you're struggling to provide for and there aren't any services in place to help you, so you don't even have time to do any fitness or anything like that? And then if you blame someone for that, that's victim blaming. You shouldn't be putting that on them. So that's why there's like, I think this is a very weird and multifaceted issue, and so I kind of see where everyone's coming from on this in that case.
I feel like I can too, but it's so weird still to think about. I see where it's coming from. I can't remember which of my videos it was, but I've done a couple of controversial videos, you know, when I talk about this topic before. And in one of them, I actually did some deep research on the origins of fat acceptance. And it was, I guess this depends on the source, but I've read from a few sources that it was started specifically for Black women. And I find that interesting too, because if you look at statistics, like released by the Center for Disease Control, Black women are the most obese demographic in the United States. So it's interesting that fat acceptance is for Black women. So I see where it kind of comes from. And I've also seen people equate the desire for weight loss to racism. I can see where they're coming from, but what I feel like they're doing is cherry picking bits of racial discourse of history. Like I said before, I think there's a book. I haven't read it, but I've seen it mentioned a lot online, especially on TikTok in this discussion. There's somebody wrote a book about how fatphobia specifically is tied to racism.
I'm reading the book right now.
It's
it's called Fearing the Black Body. It talks a lot about like how, I guess, back in like, I don't remember exactly because I'm still at the beginning, but like 16th and 17th century, like
way
Europeans,
back.
when you go way back and you're looking at like the nobility and the serfdom and like all of that, and then like they started bringing like the slave trade to Europe and things like that, and people started equating like a certain body types with certain qualities.
Most of the crap that I come across is some stupid weight loss trend for weight loss specifically, and it's usually white females that gravitate toward that stuff.
Yeah, like the Gwyneth Paltrow types, the crunchy moms, the women who are into the all that side of things.
The shoving coffee up their ass and stuff.
Oh.
Yes. In my video, I said, I think it's cultural.
Growing up in the 90s, like white women beauty standards in the 90s were like, they were like, you had to be so thin. It was all like, does this make my butt look big and stuff, when you were expected to say no. And nowadays you would want someone to say yes. If they said no, you'd be offended.
Getting told you have getting told you have a small butt is an insult. I did have a discussion about just like beauty standards among like races, and it's just interesting because something that I think about, like just being on YouTube and being in social media, every time I've been called fat, it's been by a white woman. And whenever I've been called too skinny in my life, it's been by Black women. So I think
interesting.
Yeah. So and I think a lot of that is because like, kind of like you said, like in the 90s, and I don't know, I feel like it's kind of starting to come back with the goddamn Gwyneth Paltrows of the world. Just like maybe beauty standards among white females is just like being skinny. And I don't consider my body skinny, but then if you put me in a group of like the average size Black woman, I'm probably gonna be among the smallest people in there. So to them, I'm skinny.
Yeah.
So it is interesting.
I also think we can see this concept of Black women being the most overweight demographic. It kind of makes sense when framed in the context of the pseudoscience of BMI. The categorizations of overweight and obese are still determined by your BMI number, which in my opinion is beyond outdated, not to mention inaccurate. The BMI formula was created by measuring averages among white men. Someone being overweight for a white man doesn't say anything if they're not a white man. It might also not say anything if they are a white man either, because remember, there are so many many other factors that BMI doesn't measure. But even in a demographic sense, it only measured one group of people from one culture with one set of eating habits from one time period. Keep in mind that women on the whole tend to have, on average, a higher body fat percentage than men do because our hips are often wider and larger, so a woman being categorized as overweight, again, in a vacuum, means absolutely nothing.
One of the best videos that I think I've found on this topic so far is a video from leftist non-binary creator Ryan Beard.
If we want to help fat people, we have to fix the systems that are hurting them. Doctors often give fat people incomplete care because of fatphobic bias. I have actually personally faced this type of medical fat phobia. Last year, I was suffering from a condition called costochondritis, which is an inflammation of the cartilage that connects the ribs to the breastbone. When I went to a doctor and told him about these symptoms, all he said to me was, "You're out of shape, you need to lose weight." Health exists on a spectrum, and labeling someone as healthy or unhealthy doesn't accomplish anything because everyone is healthy in some ways and unhealthy in others. As I mentioned before, I believe in body neutrality. I think someone should be able to gain weight, gain muscle, lose muscle, get surgery, or not get surgery without facing ridicule. In my opinion, labeling everyone who chooses to lose weight as fatphobic is very bad systemic analysis. Let's compare this to another example. I personally believe that the plastic surgery industry is incredibly misogynistic because it pushes toxic beauty standards, especially onto women. If someone posts on the internet that they got plastic surgery, would it be fair to respond to that person by saying, "You're a misogynist for getting plastic surgery because the plastic surgery industry pushes misogynistic beauty standards onto women, so by choosing to get plastic surgery, you are perpetuating that misogynistic system, and therefore you are a misogynist"? No, I don't think this would be reasonable. Our focus should be on criticizing the people who run the plastic surgery industry, not on criticizing the individuals who choose to get plastic surgery. Women shaving their body hair is also usually motivated by misogynistic beauty standards. But is every woman who chooses to shave her body a misogynist? No.
So I absolutely love this video. I love the ways that Ryan simultaneously accurately portrayed the real world struggles that many fat people face, condemned all forms of bullying, discrimination, and prejudice based on body size, and also, at the same time, explained that the personal choice to lose weight is not a fatphobic action in and of itself. I thought the comparison to the plastic surgery industry was especially strong. Yes, the plastic surgery industry does profit from misogyny. But someone might choose to get plastic surgery, some people for aesthetic reasons, others for health reasons. Hell, I got plastic surgery for both health reasons and aesthetic reasons, and that doesn't mean that that individual person is misogynistic for making that choice. It means that it was the right choice for them. If they then tried to promote that as the right choice for everybody, then yes, I would agree, that is shitty. But if they're making the right choice for them, that is their right. And yes, for some people, in some cases, there can be serious health benefits to losing weight.
Adipose tissue is an active endocrine organ. It's an active organ, and certain types of adipose tissue secrete inflammatory cytokines called adipokines. And these adipokines, when you have higher levels of them circulating throughout your body, they can cause a lot of kind of downstream effects of other issues such as dyslipidemia affecting your cholesterol, insulin resistance, and a lot of other things like that. Kind of like, it's sort of a cascade effect. The other part of the conversation is too, I don't think it's fair to look at a fat person and say, "You're fat because you didn't put down the fork." Obesity is a multifaceted condition, and there are a lot of things that contribute to it. Socioeconomic factors, even race, ethnicity, your environment, education level, genetics can play as little as 5% of a role or up to like 70% of a role. It varies, based on everybody. So it's also completely unfair to say that fat people are just fat because they're lazy and eat too much. That's also unfair to say because there are a lot of additional things that play into that as well. Something that I really, really hate seeing is somebody who has struggled for a very long time to lower their body weight, and they keep getting handed quick fixes by people who don't give a shit about. Can I swear?
Yeah, you can swear as much as you want. I swear all the time.
Being taken advantage of and being given like, here's a quick fix. I mean, they don't say it's a quick fix when they're marketing it, but that's what it is. It's just a temporary thing. And it's going to help in the short term, but then in the long term, what's going to happen is you're going to regain the weight and then you feel badly about yourself.
The first time I heard that I was like fatphobic or that my name, I remember someone said like the fact that I call myself obese is fatphobic. I do think that there are so many good points, and I bring this up all the time, that fat acceptance or health at every size, whatever term you want to use, there are genuine things that I think are good, like things that I experienced myself when I was bigger, right? Like the medical discrimination, that's one of the biggest ones, right? Like I had doctors that treated me so bad when I was a kid. And it made me, guess what it made me do? Never want to go to the doctors again. And guess what? I didn't go to the doctors for so long. There is just as much, if not more, extreme sides on the fitness stuff that I think is absolutely bonkers, bananas, crazy as well, you know?
But beyond people's discussions of what is and is not fat phobic, I'm seeing more and more people stating that choosing weight loss is inherently eugenics. That wanting a specific body for yourself, taking steps toward achieving it, must mean that you view your body or your body goal as superior, and therefore you must believe in some kind of hierarchy of physical traits, and therefore you must subscribe to Nazi science. No, let's talk about what eugenics is. According to the Encyclopedia of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, by 1933, the theories of racial hygiene were embedded into the professional and public mindset. These theories influenced the thinking of Adolf Hitler and many of his followers. They embraced an ideology that blended racial anti-Semitism with eugenic theory. In doing so, the Hitler regime provided context and latitude for the implementation of eugenic measures in their most concrete and radical forms. Medical professionals implemented many of these policies and targeted individuals the Nazi defined as hereditarily ill, those with mental, physical, or social disabilities. Nazis claimed these individuals placed both a genetic and a financial burden upon society and the state. So unless you're like a really horrible person, I think we can all agree that eugenics is an extremely terrifying concept and is an extremely horrible part of history that has had lasting impacts on our world. It's led to the forcible sterilization of people with various health conditions and the forced sterilization of people in various racial groups because the leaders in power determined that they had traits that were undesirable to their idealized society. Now, there is a place where you can draw a connection to body science and that type of thing. You could easily make the argument that eugenics comes into play if a doctor refuses to help an obese person get fertility treatments because they don't think that person deserves to reproduce. Yes, that would be eugenics. Eugenics and Nazi science can absolutely have a detrimental impact on people with larger bodies. As everyone I interviewed for this video has agreed, and I agree as well, there is a serious medical bias against fat people, and that needs to change. But that is a completely different topic from saying that someone choosing to lose weight for their own personal reasons, whether those reasons are related to their specific health conditions or their specific aesthetic goals, to say that that has any root in eugenics. Eugenics creates a hierarchy of physical traits. Just because someone chooses something for their own body does not mean they view that thing as an inherently superior goal on a global scale. That would be like saying that it's eugenicist of me because I'm never going to get pregnant and I don't want to reproduce. I never want to be pregnant. I never want to give birth to a child. Those reasons are my own because I don't want that for my personal body. At the same time, I also have dealt with various physical disabilities throughout my life. As a result of the fact that I'll never be getting pregnant, I'm not going to pass on those traits to another person. But I'm not making that choice because I don't think with people with my condition should exist or should reproduce. If someone else who has scoliosis and has grown up unable to walk and has OCD and every other condition that I have or have dealt with, if that person says, I want to have kids, I want to have tons of kids, they should. And many of them are, and I encourage it. But I'm not getting pregnant because giving birth freaks me out. I'm not reproducing, and it's not because I view myself as inferior or my genes as inferior, it's because I don't want to. If someone wants to lose weight, it's not because they think fat people as a whole shouldn't be allowed to exist, it's because they want to lose weight. Again, if you are out here making the argument that nobody should be allowed to be fat because it's putting a strain on our healthcare system, I'd first ask, what healthcare system, Steven Crowder? And second, yeah, now you are getting into weirdo eugenics territory. But people like me, people like John from Obese to Beast, people like Megan Ann and Brianna Jewell, none of us are saying that thin is inherently better, or that people should try to pressure anyone else to be thin. We're all just saying that it should be up to us to make our own choices. So when you get people saying things like, of course we should have known that guy was a Nazi, he was a fitness instructor after all, that is just mind-blowing to me. But as I've said, these are, at the end of the day, some of the most extreme ends of the spectrum. As I researched the topic, I started to wonder if these more extreme views were gaining traction on both sides of the aisle due to the growing presence of the internet as a staple in our everyday lives. In my interviews with everyone, a common thread I noticed was the differentiation between what they saw in the gym before the rise of social media versus what has been amplified from social media and how the online sphere encourages these extremes.
I'm seeing this trend on social media that fitness personalities, like influencers, will equate physical fitness or physical health with conservative values and then portray non-conservatives as unfit or lazy. And it's not based on evidence. Like it's just one person's narrative, and it just aligns. So many people take that, they see how that is working for that person's growth in social media, and then just kind of continue on that when it's just an ideology that is not evidence-based.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Yeah, like where is this idea coming from? Because I do see this, like I've seen a lot of conservative influencers talking about like, oh, it's these leftist feminists,
Purple-haired people who can't.
You got purple hair. Like there's just like this stereotype there.
With social media playing a bigger and bigger part in our lives as the years go on, I don't think we can ignore the massive impact that influencer culture has had on the ways people view physical fitness, health, diet culture, and more. We can easily point to one side of the aisle, the Gwyneth Paltrows of the world, the communities of alternative health and crash diets where people starve themselves or ask you to starve yourself for the sake of selling you on their newest product. But beyond that, I think influencer culture has contributed a lot to the way we view what it means to be strong. And while the outcomes are often similar, the ways these ideologies target men versus women can be very different.
A lot of the studies and articles I've been reading a lot of studies and various articles on different websites and magazines that talk about gyms becoming more of this like, pipeline to the alt-right, or like this, they bring people into conspiracy theories, and those studies mostly focus on men. And so I'm wondering from your perspective as a man, why you think that happens, and also I guess what you think a better gym experience could be like for men so that they don't get caught up in that kind of thing.
When it comes to the health at every size, body positivity, you see more women there. Why is that? I think about this a lot because honestly, most of my audience is women, right? And so I've thought about this, and I think, and I've talked to my girlfriend about this too. Women are judged more on their looks, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the beauty standards. That's a huge thing for women, right? Oh, yeah. From growing up and all that stuff. But then for men, it's your status. It's kind of your looks, but it's more like your muscle. Like, are you strong? Guys, I feel like you have this mentality of screw whatever happened. It doesn't matter. Just go to the gym, just work through it. Don't focus on these negative thoughts, or don't focus on these just emotions, don't focus on this stuff. Just be a man, just freaking push it down, go to the gym and lift, and then you'll be better. Right. And then that's when guys get sucked into maybe taking things that they shouldn't be. The influencers that are a little bit more over the top, guys end up gravitating towards that, and then the messages they're sharing, I think there's tons of people I could bring up, but think about Andrew Tate or something like that, right? That's a really popular one, and I see it myself. I literally I'm sure he won't watch this, but there's a friend of mine that I've been friends with him on Instagram forever. I know he recently went through not the best relationship, and what is he posting on his stories? Andrew Tate clips, and it's just wanting to feel like a man in some way. So you go to the gym, and then you see the other guys that are promoting that lifestyle. What are they promoting? Bam, 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 bam. And it just keeps going from there.
In my experience, as a woman who's had, issues with dealing with anger and regulating my emotions and things like that, going to the gym has helped me a lot with that. But I think that there is a specific thing that men have to deal with, where even when I had to deal with that, I was very expressive with my emotions before. And as a woman, I don't think anyone really would judge me as hard for that. Whereas when you're a man, it's not even a conscious choice always. It's just kind of a thing you're brought up seeing, that you don't want to be that outwardly expressive with your emotions because people don't expect it of you. And so then the gym becomes the only emotional outlet, and it becomes too much of something you just lean on that instead of anything else. I can kind of see where that unique thing would come from. And a lot of the male influencers who are really into gym culture are also pushing this whole idea that getting strong, if you gotta be physically strong to be a man, you have to be stronger than women, you have to be all of that stuff. That's been part of the problem also with the rise of social media, seeing that becoming more of a problem. Yeah
And then when you talk about emotion, it's it feels like you were taught to hide emotion unless it's anger. Yeah. And then that's the one that you're allowed to use. And then, those are the ones that guys see. And then it's almost as a man, you feel like that's the only one that you respect as well. If you see a guy crying or just being generally maybe even just happy, people feel that's weird, it's
to see a guy just being too happy or too enthusiastic or excited about something is what are you so happy? But let men be happy.
And the thing that I've found to be funny is that a lot of times these guys that are so anti like feminism and maybe even intersectionality, they would benefit so much from it, you know, because there's so many things that I think men struggle with that they just don't talk about, and then they get frustrated that no one talks about it. But it's like, we have to talk about it.
A lot of men are even like subconsciously just kind of given this idea growing up that their value is going to be not just physical strength, but how much money they make. That like in a world where money equals power, if you're not making enough money, your value as a man is completely diminished, and there's nothing else you have to offer the world. So when we're in a time where there's like tons of economic insecurity, when you go through like a giant pandemic that costs people their jobs and destroys industries and things like that, a lot of men are left feeling really directionless. And then a lot of the influencers that are specifically targeting young men who feel directionless are the Jordan Peterson types, who's not a fitness guy, but is on a weird number of fitness podcasts. I don't know why, considering he's not, I don't think he even works out, but you've got people like him. And then you get the Andrew Tate guys and guys like that who are like, oh, I have a resource to help these young men who feel kind of directionless. I think they need a better role model.
It's just so frustrating. And I just wish that these dudes, like, I think sometimes it's hard to feel empathetic because a lot of this stuff is so, like, the more extreme stuff feels so vile and vulgar. But like a lot of times what's underneath that is a scared boy.
Yeah.
It's a scared boy that didn't get raised right. The thing that said is the more extreme it is, the more popular it gets and the more people that see it. And then, you know, that's just what's frustrating about the internet, I think partially, is that the more extreme thing gets more of the views and attention. And so more people feel like that's normal. And so they go towards that, you know, same sides, right? It's like, that's the thing that gets more attention. That's what more people talk about. And so then people start to think, oh, that's must be pretty normal because this guy has 5 million followers or whatever.
Especially for young men, it's important to have a solid role model. On this channel, we often talk about the slow build to the ways that cults form. Someone entices you with the promise of something reasonable, and then once you trust them, they suck you down their pipeline and into their cult. Let's look at the red pill, for example. Red pill guys, including people like Andrew Tate, give young men the following advice. Lifting weights is good for your mental health. I'd give you that advice too. For many people, that is true. But if you're a teenage boy or a young man in your 20s, and you're trying to make a solid income and you're starting to feel directionless and worthless in your life, and you notice that these influencers are right about the fitness advice, it is making you feel better, well, maybe they're right about other things too. Maybe you'll start listening to their other advice. I'd love to see more positive male role models for young men out there. And for women at the gym, I think the influencers are slightly different, but the trajectory is similar. Maybe you follow Gwyneth Paltrow's alternative health advice, and next thing you know, you're on her weird crash diet. Or maybe you're from one of America's many conservative religious communities, many of which tend to be disproportionately targeted by multi-level marketing companies due to their false promises that you can be a stay-at-home mom while also generating an income, and then you end up in a fitness, diet, or weight loss MLM like It Works or Beachbody or Juice Plus. At the end of the day, what does this mean? What do we do? Pretty much everyone I interviewed said the same thing. We need to remove morality from the discussion. During my interview with Kat, we talked about the book Fearing the Black Body by Dr. Sabrina Strings, which talks about the ways that diet culture is intertwined with racism. In addition, this book talks about how white Christian communities upheld thinness and dieting as an ideal. For them, wanting to be thin wasn't necessarily about enjoying exercise or trying to alleviate joint pain. For a lot of those 18th and 19th century Christian communities, it was about viewing fatness as gluttony and seeing life in larger bodies as sinful. And I think a lot of those ideas are still permeating our views of diet and fitness culture today. At the same time, in just the past decade or so, with the rise of the fat acceptance movement, we've seen people viewing formerly fat people who chose to lose weight as traitors for choosing to change their body, or claiming that they can't be in the body positivity community anymore, or trying to ascribe a moral motivation to their weight loss, like the assumption that they must view a thin body as superior. At the end of the day, I think our best bet is to just remove all morality from our examination of our bodies, because, as Kat said, bodies are morally neutral. Being fat or thin, being weak or strong, being in shape or out of shape, or even being healthy or unhealthy doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. It's absolutely cruel to harass someone for being fat. It's cruel to claim that someone is promoting obesity just because they're modeling a cute, revealing outfit or making social media content about their life. That's not promoting anything. That's just a person living their life, and there's nothing immoral about being happy in the body you have, regardless of its size. At the same time, if someone has specific body goals, like wanting to lose weight, for whatever reason they have, be it health, appearance, aesthetics, anything else, that should also be viewed as morally neutral. The only moral judgments we need to make, in my opinion, are about the ways we treat other people and the impact that our actions have on others' lives. It's similar to how I don't think it's useful or kind to make unsolicited comments on anyone's body. Telling someone they need to lose weight is just mean and it's none of your business. Congratulating someone for losing weight also isn't great all the time, especially since people can lose weight due to illnesses and other factors outside of their control. My point is, let's just stop judging people by their appearance in general. I think the sooner we can move towards body neutrality as our stance, the sooner we can move towards equality in other areas as well.
At the end of the day, one of the reasons I really liked Ryan Beard's video on this topic was that they focused on the importance of blaming the system, not the individual people within it. And I think that's where my thoughts are largely going to fall on this topic too. There are a lot of reasons that the fitness space can bring people, especially men, down an alt-right pipeline, and that sometimes certain hobbies in the gym can feel like they're mutually exclusive from a feminist worldview. But in pretty much every way, I think there's a corrupt system to blame for that phenomenon. When it comes to issues like fatphobia and anti-fat bias, I think our first line of attack should be the US healthcare system. And I'm specifically talking about the US here because that's the only country I've ever lived in, so if you have a different perspective, if you're from a different country, feel free to leave me your thoughts below on that. But to say our healthcare system is flawed here is a massive understatement. It's absolutely criminal that people don't get equal access to doctors and specialists, and that going to the doctor to get a necessary surgery can bankrupt a family. And along with that, the profit-driven nature of healthcare seems to let bad doctors get away with treating white men as the default patient, leading to countless instances of racism and sexism in medicine, which can absolutely contribute to things like fatphobia, especially when we look at the ways that BMI, a metric that never took women or people of color into account in its creation, is still used as a data point in analyzing someone's health and even figuring out if they qualify for a certain diagnosis. That is beyond wrong. It really shouldn't be a surprise to y'all that the medical system discriminates against women. I even made a video about a year ago talking about my decade-long struggle to get a proper diagnosis and treatment for a health issue related to my reproductive system, because so many OBGYNs focus solely on pregnancy due to the narrative that women's fertility is their most important quality, which causes other issues unrelated to pregnancy to often go unnoticed. Now, if the woman seeing the doctor is also fat, then yeah, you've got a doctor who is 1, not taking their health concerns seriously due to misogyny, and 2, potentially overlooking other serious health concerns in favor of only focusing on that person's weight. Combine that with the fact that lower income people often lack access to even see the doctor in the first place, it's pretty clear why these are pieces of leftist ideology, especially when medical discrimination so perfectly illustrates so much of systemic inequality in our society. What I'm saying is that the system is deeply flawed, and I think that can lead to a lot of misplaced blame on people who choose to lose weight for their own personal reasons. I'm not going to accept that in order to be a real feminist. I can't believe in intentional weight loss ever. Because I think a key piece of feminism is also bodily autonomy for individual women. And if I want to bulk and cut, I'm going to bulk and cut. I was bulking a few months ago, and right now I'm cutting, and I'm gonna keep doing that. I like being a gym bro, but at the same time, I think it's important that people like me are on alert surrounding the messaging that fellow gym bros can be perpetuating, especially when it comes to pseudoscience surrounding scammy supplements, steroid abuse, or anti-vaccine conspiracy theories. Unsurprisingly, I think corporations are to blame for a lot of this, even tech companies. The only reason anyone even gives a single shit about Andrew Tate or even knows who he is anymore is that he gets a lot of views on social media for being controversial, and that incentivizes algorithms to promote his work. Even though he's been banned from TikTok, that doesn't stop other fitness influencers from finding a financial incentive to host Jordan Peterson on their podcast or to promote alt-right shit if that's what's popular. And in part, that's why I think we need more cool, buff, muscle mommy, feminist influencers to follow out there. I'll link some of my favorite gym girl Instagrams in the description below. I highly recommend Claire Max, a queer, nerdy cosplayer and buff as hell lifter, and Lean Beef Patty, who alternates workout content with goofy memes. I love both of their accounts. So social media is definitely a place where we can look for that as well. There's also the multi-level marketing corporations that often bring this hyper-capitalist mentality to many athletic women, causing them to become both victims and perpetrators of the culture that MLMs foster. Plus, food deserts and fitness deserts leave a lot of people unable to pursue certain types of health that is, once again, a systemic issue on a global scale related to how the US discards important social programs. Basically, what I'm saying is capitalism is the problem. At the end of the day, I can see why the gym attracts dude bros from the alt-right, but at the same time, I'd love to see more feminists getting into gym culture. I'd love it if the next time one gym bro criticizes another guy for going woke, if everyone laughed at the rude guy instead of the woke guy. Because gyms have the potential to be equalizers. Pretty much everyone's at the gym to do something they love, whether that's training for a competition, practicing a sport, or just finding ways to move their body that are enjoyable to them. Whether you're young or old, rich or poor, male, female, gay, straight, bi, trans, cis, non-binary, fat, thin, buff, disabled, able-bodied, or anything else, if you want to be at the gym, you belong at the gym. And I'd love to find ways to work together toward making a world where everyone truly felt welcomed at the gym. I'd love to hear more thoughts from you guys about ways that we can improve gym culture to make it more welcoming to everyone, so please leave your thoughts on all of that in the comments below. Thank you for sticking with me on this really long video. I hope it's opened up some discussions, but now that I'm done filming, I'm off because I have to go do arm and shoulder day at the gym. But Savvy, in the intro to this video, you said you just got back from the gym. Yeah, I filmed this on 2 different days and wore the same outfit so that it wouldn't look like I filmed it on 2 different days. Don't tell anyone. Thanks for watching, bye!
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.